Okay. Only I have Dr. Musa here and Bernardo. Hi, Dr. Musa, how are you?
You sound?
Yes, how are you?
How are you? Okay.
See you.
Welcome.
فرصة سعيدة نشوفك. أهلا.
الحمد لله من عمان طبعا حنتكلم.
أهلين. هلا حبيبي. صديق عمان من زمان
ما شاء الله.
جلالة سيدنا.
حياك الله، الله يحييك.
الله يخليك.
يا هلا. والحمد لله على سلامة الجميع يا أخي.
الله يحفظك حبيبي، الله يديمك.
والله
امين يعني.
في ترجمة بالبرنامج؟
نعم في ترجمة بالعربي.
أيوة.
لازم تختار اللغة الصينية عشان تسمع العربي، لأنه في زوم ما في اسمه عربي، فإن كانت ترجمة الإنجليزي أو الفرنسي كفي صيني وعشان تسمع العربي.
كويس. إن شاء الله.
Fatima, always you are our supporter.
I'll try.
Hi Fatima.
Hi Giulio. Hi.
Allora io te le lascio.
الو.
Guarda qua. Ok.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام أستاذ محمد. أهلا وسهلا.
Hi Giulio, how are you?
I'm good. You?
Good to see you. Fine, thank you. Lot
of
coronavirus in our side.
No, now it's fine. Life is almost back to normality.
Yeah, but it's better now in Italy.
Much better. Yeah. Not much
Good,
better.
Good.
Yeah. Beaches are crowded again and so on. So no more problem.
Okay.
Giulio, if you don't mind, I will call the speakers to see if they are here to check the technical issues. Okay. So, if Ms. Rula Kalyubi from the cabinet of Her Excellency Rana Al-Mashat is...
Good afternoon, Giulio.
نعم.
Abdel Majid. We can hear you. On vous écoute.
We're here from the Ministry of International Cooperation from Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would call Honorable Ian Byron if he's here with us.
Hello.
Hello, nice to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. And from the office of Honorable Margarita Marquez. Anybody there? No. Mr. Sufyan Al-Isa, are you with us? Mr. Sufyan? Mr. Saeed Al-Hashimi, WTO? Mr. Saeed Al-Hashimi.
مساء الخير.
مساء النور.
كيف الحال؟ إن شاء الله بخير، الحمد لله. سلامتكم.
أهلا وسهلا. أهلا وسهلا.
أنا النائب نضال الطاني من الأردن.
أهلا وسهلا أستاذ.
هل
Mr.
سيف
Enrico Resmini. Mr. Enrico Resmini. Mr. Ayman Sajini. Honorable Margarida Marquez. Hello. Honorable Margarida, European Parliament.
Hi, how are you? I'm Nabil from ICD. I would like only to inform you that the CEO of ICD, Mr. Ayman Sajini, will join after 3 minutes. After 30
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nabil. Well noted.
Please, the language, اللغة
نعم.
اللغة نحط Chinese.
حط Chinese عشان تسمع العربي.
Chinese حاطين Chinese بس ما صار ترجمة يعني.
نعم.
ما صار ترجمة حتى الآن.
لسه ما بدينا الأشغال.
لسه ما بدأت الترجمة.
لما نبدأ
لم تبدأ
تبدأ الترجمة.
خيرا إن شاء الله خير.
Hi, I'm Ioan Sarakiotis from IAO.
Hi. Hi, nice to see you again.
Good evening. I am Emmanuel Weiser from the Jerusalem Chamber of Commerce.
نعم أسمعك أنا. Yes.
Hello from me. I'm Charalambos Tebemtu from Cyprus.
Yes. Translation. أسمعك الآن. نعم. حياك الله. لا هيك لا طيب خلي
Fatima, how does it look now?
Yes, it's better, much better.
Are we? Good.
But we can't hear you very loudly. If you can just approach the microphone when you speak.
Is it better like that?
Yeah, I think you need to approach the microphone when you speak,
well.
so we hear you better.
So are we ready or how?
We are just checking with the speakers, and we start in a couple of minutes.
I lost the connection.
Sorry, I said we are checking with the keynote speakers if they are here with us, so we can start.
Fatima, can you hear me, Di Luca or
Yes.
Malta? Okay.
Yes, good afternoon, I hear you.
I switch off the microphone.
Thank you. Start.
Fatima, have we checked the speakers?
Yes, we are missing the European Parliament for the session 1, and
Okay.
the others are all here.
I suggest then we start. Welcome, good afternoon to all of you. And then when Honorable Margarita Marquez join us, either she takes her place or she will speak after the one which follows, and we will duly inform Honorable Centemero.
Okay.
If everybody is ready, then I have the honor and pleasure to ask our president, Honorable Karim Darwish, to open the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here with you, all of you. It's a pleasure and an honor to have this event, and hopefully the upcoming event will be in Milan like last year with the inauguration, and due to the circumstances, it is done virtually this year. So hopefully next year we'll be physically together, inshallah. Excellencies, distinguished guests, honorable colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this important meeting of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean on post-COVID economic recovery and support to the private sector. Our meeting today acquires a great importance, both in terms of timing and in terms of the strategic relevance of the topics it addresses. As you all are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world of work upside down. It is having a dramatic effect on the jobs, livelihoods, and well-being of workers and their families, and on entrepreneurs across the globe, particularly the small and medium-sized. The impacts are falling disproportionately on those who were already in precarious circumstances and who can least absorb the additional blow. The pressure on our governments is unprecedented. The socio-economic measures required have no precedence in terms of scope and size. During the last weeks, PAM has worked in close cooperation and coordination with regional and international key players to identify and share options for the economic recovery. Moreover, PAM established cooperation with the World Travel and Tourism Council and the UN World Tourism Organization, as tourism is one of the most affected sectors and was heavily hit by the pandemic. Today, this forum builds on two segments and wishes to contribute on a number of important issues for our region. We succeeded in gathering decision makers and economic actors to share best strategies for the speedy and swift recovery, and to support SMEs in getting back on their feet and having alternative capital market in the recovery phase. And I wish to thank Honorable Giulio Centemero for convening this meeting. As parliamentarians, politicians, and experts, we need to adopt the right socioeconomic response measures to prevent more people from falling into poverty and unemployment, and to enable the private sector to flourish and speed recovery across our borders. I am glad that so many participants have been able to attend with us. We have 160 delegates from 26 countries. We have representatives from private sector, from the governments, of course, and gives me great pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Rania Al-Mashat, my dear friend and one of the most prominent lady ministers in Egypt, and a dear friend as well as all of you to this important meeting to share our experience and to put together a plan for PAM to support our region in this very difficult time. With no further delay, I wish to thank you all once more and conclude by welcoming you all and wishing you all a great meeting.
Thank you very much, President Darwish, for your nice word. And now I will ask Honorable Giulio Centemero to assume the chair of the meeting and to start with the session. Giulio, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary General, and especially thanks to all of you and thanks to President Karim Darwish. We're living challenging times. We're living unprecedented times. If we thought of it like 6 months ago, it would have seemed incredible. But here we are, and we have to restart and reshape our economies. We are talking about business and economy in this meeting in the current scenario. So last year we gathered physically, and hopefully next year we'll gather physically again. We started a couple of projects. Following this meeting, some verticals work group will be held in which we will deploy and develop this project. We are already working on them, but it's key to involve all the countries composing the Parliamentary Assembly and beyond. So, cutting the long story short, I would like to go into details of today's meeting. The first panel will concern policies and economic measures for a swift recovery, and it will involve mainly lawmakers and public stakeholders. And second panels will concern measures for the productive sector in overcoming the impact of COVID, and it will involve people and personalities mainly involved in the economic sector, in the financial sector, and so forth. So I'd like to start asking a couple of questions to each panelist of the first panel. So I would like to welcome, it's a real honor, Her Excellency Minister Rania Al-Mashat. I hope she's there.
Yes, I'm here and I can see you and hear you well. Thank you.
Very well, very well. So I'll ask you this couple of questions. So in a recent interview with Nadine Hani, I saw that you're supporting the stakeholder capitalism because PPP can be key to what you call a great reset for the MENA region. Could you explain us how it would work and if you are implementing this principle in your country, Egypt? Second question would be, what actions have been implemented by your ministry and government to tackle the COVID-19 crisis? In these actions, did you consider gender policies and sustainable goals?
Thank you very much. First, I thank you for convening this meeting. I know that Zoom sort of views have become very common for all of us. I believe that concerning your first question, private-public partnerships have proved very, very important, particularly during this pandemic. No country could go through this without very close cooperation between the public sector, the private sector, and civil society. So when we talk about stakeholder capitalism, everybody has been involved during COVID. But what we are very keen on is that momentum continues even more strongly going forward. You referred to my interview a few days ago, and in that we have put together as a regional action group where we meet. There's a platform with the World Economic Forum that includes myself, other public sector representatives from the region, as well as private sector representatives and civil society. And the idea is putting together a framework so that we capitalize on many of the initiatives that have been taking place very effectively during COVID so that they continue afterwards. So for instance, number one, accelerating inclusive economies and societies. For example, we find in our case in Egypt, we pushed very quickly with expanding the social safety nets. We had very special programs for women during COVID. We were the first country to create a COVID response for women, and we have a policy tracker that takes a look into that on a monthly basis and reports. So the idea here is the importance of not leaving anyone out has been truly expedited through structural reforms that have taken place and pushed us all to push through these reforms. For instance, we have now more than 1.5 million informal workers who have been on the database of the government to receive monetary rewards. So all of these are very, very important policies. And we have done it on a national level. What we mean by pushing the stakeholder capitalism is to also, for the region, to capitalize on the individual country initiatives so that it is more leveraged and scaled up. The other one has to do with, of course, elements related to the fourth industrial revolution. For example, I give you what Egypt has gone through. And this is something we see in other countries as well. Education for many months has been taking place online. And because of the reforms that have taken place, and we thank our colleagues from the Egyptian parliament who help us ratify agreements that push for reforms on different sectors, we have been able to put a big number of students online rather than going physically to school. Tests have been doing the same. We have seen that connectivity is very, very important. So the access to internet, how we can capitalize on the youth, which are very technologically savvy. So this is a very important initiative. The fourth or the third point has to do with the environmental stewardship. So everybody is today through different monetary and fiscal policies pushing for stimulus packages to make sure that there is employment and that the economies continue. But the very important thing is to ensure that these projects are done in a way that guarantee a green recovery, particularly in a region that is affected by water scarcity, desertification, and of course, hot weather. In our case, for example, just last week, Cabinet has passed that in every project, there has to be an environmentally sustainable element. And that is to ensure that all the fiscal stimulus packages are done in a way that are environmentally consistent. The fourth and very important point has to do with regional integration. If you take a look at the region, we find that intra-trade is quite low compared to other regions in the world. So how can we as a group push that forward? Everybody today is talking about the disruption in the global supply chains. So local supply chains and regional supply chains are very, very important. So this is just to give you 4 of the points related to stakeholder capitalism. And the idea is to make the region more resilient going forward, more resilient going post-COVID. I try to mention what we have done as a government in each of those elements. But the way I try to sum it up for the government of Egypt, it was to protect the people from the disease. It was to provide liquidity to firms and credit to firms and liquidity to customers, to households through different initiatives taken by the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. And then fourth, to progress by expediting several structural reforms related to financial inclusion, related to expanding the social safety net. And as I mentioned on women, we had a very dedicated policy response for women under COVID. And I'd just like to announce that Egypt is the first country in the Middle East and Africa to actually launch with the World Economic Forum something called Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator, which is also a public-private platform that pushes for more inclusion of women in jobs, more women in leadership positions, and third, equal pay. So these are just a few of the initiatives, but it's a very long list of policies that we've taken. And I will also send you so that all participants can get a copy of all these policy measures from the central bank, from the Ministry of Finance, and also from ministries of social solidarity. The issue of the informal sector, as Minister of International Cooperation, of course, dealing with the multilateral relationships has been extremely important. Of course, the debate that we all hear about, is multilateralism going to be adversely affected? I feel it's the contrary. This crisis has shown that no country is in isolation. Everybody has been affected. What started as a health crisis has actually ended up becoming one that has economic implications on production and supply chains and economic activity. What we have also done as a Ministry of International Cooperation is create what we call multi-stakeholder platforms. So every minister convenes with me and provides the priority list of projects that the country needs in the period ahead, because we are very keen on making sure that we do not sort of overlook our development story or overlook our SDG commitments. And with all development partners, we have these multi-stakeholder platform so that there is complementarity between our multilateral and bilateral development partners as we are accessing additional financing moving forward. I will just conclude that we have a narrative that we launched as the Ministry of International Cooperation, and that narrative is P and P and P, but it is not private-public partnership. It is people, projects, purpose. So for every agreement that we do, we have a number of beneficiaries that people are at the core. They are the ones that benefit from the different projects. Projects are identified either as public or public-private partnerships. And then the purpose is always related to one of the 17 SDGs or more. So this is a way to make sure that post-COVID, we are not forgetting the principles that bring us all together, because the 17 SDGs have proven that they affect all of us in very important ways, and therefore our commitment to these reforms going forward. Thank you very much. I think you're muted.
You were right, absolutely right. I was muted, and it was very interesting to hear what you have done very bravely in Egypt, I would say, and it's really interesting for an Italian to listen about approaches taken beyond Europe, because we are used to stay in Europe, and we're going back to Europe with the next panelist, who's Liam Byrne. I hope I pronounced it correctly, as a chair of the parliamentary network at the World Bank and the IMF. I think as a chair is doing a great job, and during especially this period of lockdown, of isolation, of COVID, the network has been holding several webinars, and it was really important to exchange views among parliamentarians. Liam, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hello. Sorry. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions also to you. First one is, what were the most common policies adopted by single states within the network during COVID period? And the second one is, according to what you heard from the network's members, and also from what you see every day in your constituency, what would be the best actions to foster the post-COVID economy and entrepreneurship in particular?
Super. Thank you very much. And hello and assalamu alaikum from the House of Commons here, where I'm speaking today. I'm going to be brief because we actually have a budget statement this afternoon, and I need to nip back into the chamber to go and give my point of view to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's standing up. Friends, crises never arrive on their own, as we know in politics. And this crisis has arrived at exactly the time when we face what I've called the three rises: the rise in temperature, the rise in technology, and the rise in new trade conflicts. These crises will define the next 15 to 20 years of our work in politics as we try and build a world of more inclusive growth while navigating these seminal changes that lie ahead. That means that we have to think ahead as we get the response to the crisis right, because we need to not only get our economies back on their feet, we have to build back better. We have to build in a way that equips us to deal with the three big changes that will define the rest of the 21st century. What we see around the parliamentary network is two very clear sets of responses. So overwhelmingly, governments have acted to save jobs. So job subsidy programs are very widespread around the world. They take different shapes, but by and large, some kind of wage replacement policy has been very common around the world and around the countries in the network. And that has come alongside income top-up schemes, because people accept that wages have taken a hit, and therefore people, if they are to have enough to live on, are going to need some kind of income replacement measures. By and large, those have been the two sets of policy responses. There have been some alterations in the way that countries have subsidized essential foodstuffs and energy costs, but by and large, it has been an income replacement scheme and a wage replacement scheme. That is very difficult to unwind. And that is, in fact, the debate that we're having today in the House of Commons here in London. How do we begin unwinding this in a way that saves jobs? So by and large, people are focused on not just saving lives, but saving livelihoods as we go into what may be the second Great Depression that we've had in the last 150 years. There are 4 or 5 measures that we see very common around the world, and getting this right, it's easier to say and much, much harder to do. But step 1 is bringing forward capital budgets. So we in the UK have an aspiration to spend up to 3% of GDP on the capital budget. I'm about to tell our Chancellor of the Exchequer that he's not brought enough of that spending forward. But that is overwhelmingly the single biggest thing that countries can do to invest in networks of the future, whether that is transport networks, low carbon transport networks, or digital networks. That is a good way of creating the infrastructure that can accelerate economic growth post-COVID while creating jobs in the meantime. The second big measure that we see people taking is action to help young people and those on low incomes. So maybe 80% of people who will be hit by the COVID recession are paid less than $10 to $15 an hour. Overwhelmingly, they are women and young people. But we know that if young people are out of work at this stage of their career, that has a scarring effect. The hysteresis that can set in can damage that young person's earnings for the rest of their lives. So wage subsidy programs that help companies employ young people, extremely important. We've just announced this afternoon several £billion worth of investment in precisely that program called Kickstarter. It's basically a job subsidy program for those under the age of 25. Support for SMEs and the informal economy is the other trend that we see. And here I'm afraid we are going to see deglobalization accelerate as governments around the world become under pressure, greater pressure to buy local and make local. Now, using public procurement to support small businesses locally is much, much harder than traditional forms of contracting, but nonetheless, that will be a political pressure that I think will become very sharp in a lot of places. Governments will be under pressure to use the power of public procurement, as we say, to keep the public pound local, to spend local on supporting small businesses. That's a bigger challenge for the informal economy, but it could be a good policy measure to help support small businesses. Women's enterprise, Her Excellency mentioned this. This is going to be a very important area of growth. In many of our deprived communities, rates of maternal employment are much, much lower than overall national rates of employment. We know that women will be hard hit by the COVID recession. And so a concerted effort to back women's co-ops, to back women's enterprise will be an important thing that we see. And then finally, we will see a whole range of measures from different governments around the world to support their manufacturing industry. And again, here, I think we can see governments now guarding against the risk of deglobalization. There is a prediction that there will be a lot more reshoring of manufacturing as trade wars and trade conflicts continue to deteriorate. Many of our partners expect the trade hostilities between the United States and China to deteriorate much further. We have new pressures like Brexit, and the risk, therefore, of supply chains becoming more local is very acute. Final two points that I think people will need to focus on. So one, as our previous speaker said, I thought with great eloquence, we have to make sure that we've got good frameworks for private sector investment rowing in behind public investment. The change of tone from the American Business Roundtable, which declared with some drama that it was moving on now from a culture of shareholder primacy, is an extremely important development. You've now got organizations like Principles for Responsible Investment. Investors signed up to that program now manage about $100 trillion worldwide. We have important initiatives like the Global Forum for Impact Investment, encouraging investors with frameworks to help promote not just investment that helps us decarbonize, but promote inclusive growth will be one of the most important sets of reforms that we can make over the next 4 or 5 years, particularly because thanks to the IMF's work, we know that inequality is a systemic risk to growth that is very, very hard for investors to diversify away from. But at the moment, it's very hard to invest for inclusive growth. And so those investment frameworks and those company reporting frameworks, financial reporting, will need to change. Final thing, at some point over the next year, we're going to need to step up our conversation about tax reform. At the moment, particularly countries in the developing world are taxing too lightly. They're not taxing enough in order to reach the sustainable development goals. And here I think the agenda will be threefold. It will be around cheating, it will be about carbon, and it will be around capital. Ultimately, the world needs to work much better together to stop tax cheating and to stop tax avoidance, to clamp down on tax havens, which are currently the home and the shelter to too much untaxed revenue. Second, we will need to develop measures of taxing carbon more aggressively in the years to come. And finally, many countries are beginning the debate now around wealth taxes and what wealth taxes could and should look like. Ultimately, owners of assets do extremely well at a time of low interest rates as we have today. Asset price inflation is very rapid around the world, and ultimately we will have to find intelligent ways of taxing that capital and those capital gains if we are to give some more security that the debts that are being built up now will be repaid. One of the biggest risks we run is a rise in interest rates that begin to knock over very elevated levels of debt. Creating more certainty that those debts will be repaid safely is one of the ways in which we can make sure that interest rates remain low. So it's going to be a very challenging period of time over the next 4 or 5 years, and the premium on working together is very high, which is why, Chair, I very much welcome the chance to participate in today's dialogue.
Thank you very much, Honorable Byrne. Especially thank you for holding all those webinars with the network, because they're very useful. Unfortunately, I cannot participate to the one tomorrow because we have our piece of budget in the Chamber of Deputies, but I thank you personally because they're very interesting and useful. Let's go on our panel. Now it's the turn of Margarida Marquez, a member of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Committee on Budget, and member also of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs at the European Parliament. Good afternoon, Margarida.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you see me and listen me?
I can hear you, I cannot see you, but I'll ask the administrator to,
yes.
Yeah, we can see you. We can see you very well. How are you? So we have a couple of questions for you. And the first one is, what are the main ideas arising from the debate within the committee and concerning the post-COVID recovery, anything specific about entrepreneurship, anything peculiar for the Mediterranean. And the second question would be, well, you have a significant experience in the European and national Portuguese, in this case, institutions. Do you think this pandemic is comparable to something that happened in the past in terms of impact on the economy?
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. Today it's a very interesting day here in the European Parliament because we had the presentation of the priorities of the German presidency. Just I finished to listen to Chancellor Merkel exposing and elaborating on the German priorities for the presidents of the Council. Later on, we will prepare the European Council, the next European Council that will take place on 17th, 18th, it means next week. So this is a useful information because in the end of the day they are the dates to approve the European answer to the crisis. So my answer to your question is no. It means this is a symmetric crisis, but with asymmetric impact in the different member states, in the different regions. And we need to work with this situation. And I'd like to raise two different moments. The first one is considering the immediate answers given by European Union. And I need to share with you that Budget Committee and the European Parliament could take decisions after sometimes 3 days after the proposal of the Commission, decisions that normally take half a year, 6 months to be decided here in the European Parliament. So everybody, all the institutions were very committed to elaborate, to create a European answer. So I need to speak, first of all, in the first phase, where the European Union react immediately with concrete proposals. It means European Commission decided to suspend the rules on state aid, for example, because governments needed to put money in some enterprises to protect the enterprises, but also to protect jobs. Some initiatives concerning investment initiatives, a program SURE, S-U-R-E, SURE. It means a new instrument to mitigate unemployment risks. This SURE initiative provides financial assistance around 100 billion in total to member states in form of loans granted on favorable terms. These loans help member states to cover the costs of national short-time work schemes, public programs that allow firms to reduce the working hours while providing income support. A decision concerning SMEs, Commission and the European Investment Fund unlock 8 billion in finance for 100,000 small and medium-sized business, or a banking package to support the households and the business, and also to give flexibility under the EU fiscal rules. And the Commission, for the first time ever, activated the general escape clause of the Stability and Growth Pact as part of its strategy to quickly and forcefully respond to the coronavirus outbreak in a timely and coordinated manner. And these enable national governments to better support the national economies and the budgetary laws have been significantly relaxed. Also, the role of the European Central Bank, that was very active, and also the role of the European Investment Bank. The European Investment Bank, the EIB group, to create a pan-European guarantee fund of 25 billion euro, which could support 200 billion of financing for companies with a focus on SMEs through the EU, including through national promotional institutions. But we need to look to the future, because we know very well that we need an immediate answer, but people, firms, economies, member states are in a very difficult situation for the future. So we need to help people, enterprises, economies, and member states to recover the crisis. It's why the Commission put on the table 3 weeks ago, more or less, a new proposal of the multi-annual financial framework. It means an updated proposal. And at the same time, European Commission proposed to create a recovery fund. A recovery fund anchored in the multi-annual financial framework in the MFF. It means that it's why in the beginning I spoke on this European Council. Commission put this proposal on the table to promote economies, to create jobs, to help member states to develop the resilience of health public systems, to promote the digital transition, the climate and energy transition, to support jobs, to valorize research in health, for example, to give to enterprises the solvency capacity. So we have new programs and we have the updated of the former programs. So this is a package. This is a package, the fund, the recovery fund for 4 years, 21st until 2024. And after, for the period of 7 years, we have all the MFF. But Commission proposed, European Parliament is prepared to react and to negotiate, but we are waiting for the decision of the European Council. It means leaders, European leaders, next 17th or 18th, they need to agree to reach a political agreement on the MFF and the Recovery Fund. And this package, MFF and Recovery Fund, consolidate the immediately reaction, the immediately recovery, but also a long-term perspective for the future and for the new generations. So it's on these aspects that we are working hard. I'm a co-rapporteur for MFF and the Recovery Fund from the Socialist Group. We have another co-rapporteur from EPP, and we have a nego team, and we work very well together, where the biggest political families at the European Parliament, we are committed to have an MFF approved as soon as possible, because citizens, firms, families, economies, member states are waiting for an European answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Margarida Marquez. Yes, time is key, and everybody highlights it. And now we have another panelist who has a great experience like you have at the European level, but today she's with us as a Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD. You can see it's Madame Isabelle Durand. Madame Durand, can you hear me?
Je vous entends très bien et j'espère que vous m'entendez également et que la traduction fonctionne.
Oui, je vous entends très bien. Et je vais vous poser des questions en anglais. I'm gonna ask question in English as I started in English. So a couple of questions for you, then you can develop your thoughts, of course. In your opinion, how can we rebuild or reshape the economy in the new scenario? And the second point is, how do you see the evolution of cooperation in the future?
Merci beaucoup pour ces deux questions. Alors, c'est vrai qu'elles sont gigantesques.
Oui.
Comment est-ce qu'on va reconstruire et comment est-ce qu'on va refaçonner? On ne pourra reconstruire intelligemment ou mieux, comme on dit, hein, BBB, Building Back Better, comme maintenant on répète ça partout. On ne pourra le faire que si on tient compte vraiment de ce qui s'est passé. Et ce que la crise du Covid a montré, et surtout les conséquences socio-économiques ont montré, c'est les limites et les risques et la vulnérabilité de notre système hyper mondialisé. Parce que si on ajoute à ce système hyper mondialisé la production just in time, on s'est bien rendu compte, tous, y compris d'ailleurs quand il a fallu équiper chacun de nos pays en masques, en blouses, en produits médicaux, etc., à quel point ce système était vulnérable. Et donc, il faut qu'on ait bien compris ça pour qu'on puisse lutter contre ces risques dans la phase de reconstruction. Et en ce sens, pour reconstruire, je pense qu'on devra justement, contrairement à ce qui a existé jusqu'ici, avoir des chaînes d'approvisionnement qui sont plus diversifiées, qui sont peut-être aussi plus régionales. C'est-à-dire que, quand je dis régional, c'est à l'échelle plutôt continentale, c'est-à-dire que l'on puisse vraiment relocaliser un certain nombre de productions plus proches. C'est bon à la fois pour les entrepreneurs locaux et pour la manufacturation au niveau régional. C'est bon aussi pour la lutte contre le changement climatique parce que ça implique évidemment moins de transport. Et puis d'ailleurs, c'est un mouvement qui est déjà en cours pour des raisons liées à l'automation. Et comme l'intelligence artificielle et toute l'automatisation permettent déjà d'avoir des productions quelque part à moins cher que celles qui étaient déjà beaucoup moins chères quand on les délocalisait dans des pays en développement. Première chose. Deuxième chose, je pense qu'on va devoir tenir compte de la révolution numérique. Enfin, on en tenait déjà compte avant, mais on va devoir en tenir compte beaucoup plus parce que, on l'a bien vu avec la distanciation sociale, la révolution numérique a fait un saut énorme partout dans le monde avec des effets positifs, au sens où ça a permis aussi l'accès à des marchandises, l'accès à des biens, mais aussi avec le grand danger de voir se renforcer encore un peu plus la fracture numérique. Et la fracture numérique, elle est mauvaise. Elle est mauvaise parce qu'elle exclut une série de pays, et en particulier les moins avancés, des bénéfices de l'économie numérique. Soit dit en passant, les bénéfices de l'économie numérique sont à 90%, je dis bien les bénéfices économiques de cette économie numérique sont à 90% américains et chinois, et à 10% pour le restant du monde, donc y compris d'ailleurs l'Union européenne, la zone de la Méditerranée, mais aussi l'Afrique. Troisième chose, je pense que vous l'avez dit d'entrée de jeu, un secteur en particulier doit requérir notre attention dans la région qui nous concerne aujourd'hui, c'est celui du tourisme. C'est un secteur qui a été terriblement affecté par le lockdown et qui représente dans la zone méditerranéenne une part très importante du PIB. On constate qu'on pourrait avoir une perte jusqu'à 2,8% du PIB à cause du lockdown dans le tourisme, enfin de la période vide, et elle ne va pas se recombler comme ça, comme par miracle cet été. Ça prendra du temps de récupérer, et puis d'ailleurs probablement qu'il faudra aussi travailler à un tourisme différent, ou un tourisme sur lequel on continuera une activité économique, mais qui soit plus respectueux aussi des questions environnementales. Troisième chose, les investissements, très important. Les investissements étrangers sont une des clés du développement. Or, toutes les prévisions, déjà avant la crise du Covid, mais aussi depuis, montrent une grande diminution des investissements directs étrangers que la CNUSET évalue jusqu'à à peu près 40% de diminution pour les années 2020 et 2021. c'est évidemment énorme et extrêmement préjudiciable pour les pays en développement ou les pays qui attendent ces investissements comme je dirais un facteur de développement. Et ça va amener évidemment à aussi une plus grande concurrence entre les États en développement pour attirer les investisseurs, puisqu'ils sont moins nombreux et qu'ils vont investir moins. La tension sera d'autant plus grande. Ça va aussi peut-être amener les gouvernements nationaux à mieux protéger quelque part ou à prendre des mesures plus restrictives sur l'investissement étranger, en tout cas pour les industries qui sont pour eux capitales ou essentielles, parce qu'elles touchent à des besoins plus primaires ou plus immédiats. Et donc, si on tenir compte de toutes ces conditions sera une des façons, si je peux dire, de refaçonner ou de reconstruire mieux et en tenant compte de la crise elle-même. Quant à la coopération internationale, je vais la diviser en deux. Il y a la coopération tout court, c'est-à-dire le dialogue des nations et la coopération politique, et puis il y a l'aide au développement. Pour ce qui est de la coopération politique, je pense que Monsieur Liam Byrne a très bien expliqué tout le contexte, y compris d'ailleurs la guerre commerciale, le contexte géopolitique dans lequel nous vivons, qui n'est pas facile. Il y a quelques jours, les États-Unis ont annoncé qu'ils retiraient leur aide, leur soutien à l'OMS, par exemple. Je crains que d'autres organisations soient aussi victimes d'un définancement et aussi d'un manque de confiance ou d'investissement dans cette coopération multilatérale plus politique. Pour ce qui est de l'aide au développement, si on regarde ce que, par exemple, à l'échelon européen, mais aussi à d'autres niveaux, mais surtout dans les pays développés, les pays se sont endettés et on a levé des tabous qui jusqu'ici étaient impossibles. On les a levés pour permettre à des gouvernements de soutenir leurs activités. Mais ils ont dépensé et ils continueront de dépenser pour soutenir les secteurs, mais aussi remplacer les salaires, etc., de telle manière qu'il y a fort à parier, et ce sont les prévisions de la CNUSET, que l'aide au développement va évidemment diminuer ou risque de diminuer encore un peu plus qu'elle n'était déjà avant la crise du Covid, ce qui évidemment amènera aussi à une perte ou à une grande difficulté pour les pays en développement de pouvoir compter sur un certain nombre d'aide au développement. Et puis, on peut même ajouter à ça ce qu'on appelle les flux financiers que les diasporas renvoient dans leur pays d'origine, qui sont généralement des flux financiers plus élevés que la coopération au développement, qui eux aussi ont diminué par l'effet tout simplement de perte de revenus de ces migrants de la diaspora. Et pour toutes ces raisons, c'est vrai que ça va nous amener, ou ça va amener les gouvernements et tous ceux qui soutiennent le dialogue entre ces gouvernements à vraiment chercher l'équilibre entre la rentabilité d'un côté et la résilience de l'autre. Mais il y a fort à penser aussi que, par exemple, en matière énergétique, on se retourne vers, vu quand on voit les prix du pétrole aujourd'hui, vers des énergies fossiles qui seront extrêmement bon marché, alors même que nous savons tous que nous devons investir dans les énergies renouvelables pour des raisons à la fois économiques et écologiques. Donc oui, voilà, il y a des conditions à se redresser mieux. La CNUSET est là aussi et continuera d'assister les pays pour essayer de leur fournir des éléments d'analyse et des recommandations qui leur permettent de le faire. Ça ne va pas être facile, ça ne va pas être automatique et le climat géopolitique n'est pas toujours le plus aisé pour se faire, mais je pense que, en tout cas, on sait d'avance sur quoi on doit mettre le doigt si on veut éviter d'avoir les mêmes effets qu'après la crise de 2008 où on n'a pas fait une bonne résilience ou une bonne relance. Merci.
Merci à vous. Thank you very much. I was really impressed, especially about what you said about the supply chain. I never saw it from this point of view. And now, last but not least, we have the guest, the host of last year, so the CEO of the Italian Stock Exchange, Mr. Raffaele Jerusalmi. You can see his CV on the screen. Mr. Jerusalmi, can you hear me?
Very well. Yes.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. I'll ask you two questions, like something that happened during the crisis and created a lot of debate, especially in the financial newspapers. All stock exchanges, except the one of the Philippines in Manila, were open and working during the pandemic peak. Do you think it was the right choice? And the second question would be, in a period in which cash is king, what role can capital markets play for the recovery?
So let me start with the first point, the first question. I mean, the experience we made over the last 25 years in managing markets is definitely showing us that even during the crisis or the worst crisis scenario, is very important to keep the market open. First of all, because nobody knows how long the crisis will last for. And so, obviously, you know, if you shut down a market, you at the same time prevent a potential opportunity for investor. The second one is that the functioning of the market is based on its own liquidity and reliability and credibility. And obviously, you know, if the market gets shut down because of a crisis, it's very likely that you will lose a part of the credibility with the investor community. And this is not going to be good for the company listed on your market. So that was the decision we took even during this crisis, and the decision that most of the exchanges took, as you were recalling us with your introduction. I would say that this is clearly very important also because the capital market, and this now moving to your second question, the capital market in general is a key to help a company to raise capital in all market conditions. Actually, during the crisis period, it is even more important for companies to be able to access capital market in order to be able to raise capital, to fund their activity, to fund their investment and project to continue to grow and to overcome successfully this period of crisis that obviously is happening at the time. This is important, and it was reminded also by our President of the Republic, Mr. Mattarella, not long ago. He gave a message during the last Consob annual meeting where he said that obviously Borsa Italiana, for example, the Italian Stock Exchange could play a very significant role in helping the recovery of the economic system in Italy post-crisis. And I think that this is very well, a point very well taken, because our role is key. It's key to help the funding of all the companies, but especially of the SMEs, the one that could suffer much the crisis because of lack of liquidity, for example, that they can face. And because we had the evidence, even during the crisis of Lehman in 2008, that a banking sector cannot be the response for all the situation. So you need to have a very well established and reliable capital market in order to help all your economic system to overcome a period of crisis, and trying to channel the liquidity from whenever is possible, including the retail investor, including the institutional investor, including all the stakeholders that are participating into the financial market. So a very efficient and reliable capital market and reliable infrastructure is key for the functioning of the economy of a country. And I think that is going to be more so in the future, and not just for equity, but also for bonds and for corporate and government bonds. Actually, our Treasury has issued in the last few weeks two different issuances, one for, let's say, the investor in general, the second one that is taking place this week for retail, And thanks to the fact that the market is functioning very well, they are able to collect and raise a lot of capital in a period of time where sometimes is more difficult, for example, to raise capital from international investors. So it's important to have all the options on the table and to offer a system that can work well in all market conditions. This is our aim, our goal, and actually I would like also to mention, not just to the benefit of the Italian stock exchange, but to the benefit of most of the exchange in the world, that the ability that we have demonstrated during the COVID crisis to move almost immediately to work remotely without having any, let me say, dysfunction or any issue, I would say is, the testimony that clearly all the infrastructure made their homework well and were well prepared already for any event. So I think that this is important because this is ultimately is the most relevant role of a financial infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yerusalmi, and it's always important to recall that there's not only the resources coming from the banking sector, but financial markets are key, and especially I would say equity markets. The approach also of public governments, it's mainly on that, but we don't have to think only on that, but also about equity. So thank you very much for your intervention, and I would like to thank also all the other panelists for the first panel, in particular Rania Al-Mashat, Liam Byrne, Margherita Marquez, Isabel Duran, and Raffaele Yerusalmi. So let's go on to the second panel, measures for the productive sector in overcoming the impact of COVID. I'm moderating this panel as well because the co-chair of the economic panel, Senator El Marbouk, unfortunately has to be in the Senate in Morocco today. So I would ask Ms. Alessandra Priante, Director of the Regional Department for Europe of the UNWTO, then a specialist in travel and tourism. I'd like to present her and ask her a couple of questions. Ms. Priante, can you hear me?
Absolutely, Giulio. Very good to see you again as well.
Very good to see you too. So our questions during this panel to you would be, what policies you think should be implemented to help businesses in the touristic sector, with maybe a focus mainly on the Mediterranean area, and what can your organization do in order to improve and reshape, according to the new reality, the hospitality sector?
Well, these are very difficult questions. I wonder how much time do we have? If we have like, no, I'm just joking.
Well, a couple of years.
Exactly, that's what I thought. Well, first of all, good to see you and good to see everybody. And thank you very much, Pam, for this fantastic invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this webinar today. Assalamu alaikum to all the Arab-speaking friends that are connected and here as co-speakers. Now, first of all, Julia, let me tell you that just before logging in, I would say the Secretariat of PAM has also asked me to enrich the discussion by sharing some scenario data, which we have quite updated. So what I would like to do, if you allow me, I would like to frame a little bit the work of UNWTO and basically make you understand what we've been doing during the COVID-19 and what we do in general, which is now the moment of, of action. So basically, we are the United Nations Specialized Agency in Global Tourism. We don't do travel, we do tourism. Tourism is a very important transversal sector that, as many of you know, is also have a great impact in the Agenda 2030. not only because it embeds, at least recognizably, 3 of its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but also because we think actually tourism touches upon all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Tourism is one of these industries that seems immaterial, it's rather material, touches upon the deepest emotions, in reality speaks money, business, employment, wealth, growth. So tourism is, and it's probably one of the reasons why I became so passionate about it. I mean, I come myself from the corporate finance. I was very happy to hear Mr. Gerosalmi just before. I'm also a Bocconi graduate. But then when I got across tourism, I realized its immense potential. And the fact that it has a value chain that is very flexible, probably one of the few industries that has an extendable value chain, as I say, you know, it's elastic because it can be very small, can be very large. Think, for example, of the times that me and you remember very well, Julia, of tourism being connected to agriculture, and think of the impact on the wider value chains for both the food and all the related, of course, elements of the value chain and wine. So, in other terms, tourism is, at the moment, everybody said, the most affected industry from this pandemic. Tourism, according to us at UNWTO, can be, because of its resilience, because of its horizontality, because of its potential impacts, the industry that recovers first. Therefore, enables country to actually come out of the crisis a little bit quicker, a little bit better. So I would like to say, Julia, that probably the first biggest recipe would be that it's very important to keep a very high level of coordination. The coordination applies globally, applies, I would say, within the European Union, within like regions, also like the Mediterranean, that have a common factor, which is in this case, is the basin of the Mediterranean Sea, but also within the single countries, between the public and the private sector. United Nations World Tourism Organization, well known as also the Organizzazione Mondiale del Turismo, or OMT, as they call it in Spain, is actually, since the beginning of this pandemic, has actually been doing its job as a United Nations agency, therefore facing the crisis. And when you face a crisis, you first of all try to analyze what are the determinants and the elements of the crisis, and start calculating what are the potential impacts. So basically, almost immediately, because we were in direct contact with WHO, we started evaluating what were the immediate effects. Obviously, the immediate effect, as we all know, was the closing of all borders. Therefore, an implementation of almost 98% of travel restrictions, which means that nobody was allowed to travel. Now, travel is, of course, very large. We don't travel just because of tourism. We travel for many reasons, because we're part of a global international mobility, which is has, you know, numerous effects in our economy. Now, of course, with international mobility being blocked, there was absolutely zero tourism. Furthermore, with a lockdown that imposed us to be not even 200 meters or 1 kilometer, maybe when we were lucky, from across our house, definitely there was not even domestic tourism. So we came to a point where the whole world was at a standstill. At UNWTO, nevertheless, we're sitting at home like we are all now. We've been evaluating every single element. And my Secretary General has started a global tourism crisis committee with all the sister agencies, with all the global private sector, and with all the member states that are represented in our region. So we had, for example, representing Europe, we had the chair of the regional commission, which is Greece, we had Spain, we had Croatia. And of course, we were in touch with everybody else. Now, the difference between this crisis and the other crisis is that this crisis in the beginning seemed like another SARS. I still remember on the 18th of February, me and Secretary General were on an official mission to Brussels trying to advocate the importance of tourism, and look how powerful we became, because then afterwards, because of COVID, everybody was finally talking tourism in the European Union, unprecedented. And we had even a commissary who woke up and asked for money, which he didn't get, but it's okay. It's still very important that that was a concern, and tourism was high up in the agenda. Everything was about China, if you remember. Everyone was thinking, okay, this is going to be a second SARS. So our forecasts at the time were like, okay, if the impact is like a new SARS, it's going to have like a minus 10%. So the 2 digits are going to be lost in Asia, but Europe is still going to be saved. When we started realizing that Europe, specifically Southern Europe, was the heart of this new sort of, unpredictable pandemic, then we started understanding that the impacts were going to be much, much bigger. And we're still in the middle of it, because when you have external markets like Russia and America, and of course, South America, in the case of more, migratory tourism, definitely you're talking about still a big loss in the international arrivals. So with your permission, Giulio, I would like to continue a little bit this not very fantastic Polaroid, but sort of truthful, by sharing my screen.
Sure.
If you allow me.
Sure. Go on, please.
So I will make sure I'm on the right slide, and then I will start the sharing. Hello? Can you see me? Hello?
Yes, we can see. We can see it.
All right. So no, sorry, because I think there was a block in the. I cannot see anything anymore.
I think Ms. Priante left us involuntarily, but I would go on, and maybe we go back to her when she reconnect. It happens during this webinar. Some hiccups can happen. So next person on the panel is
Giulio, I'm back.
You're back. Okay, so sorry, we were.
No, so sorry, Giulio. I don't know what happened. While I was doing the screen sharing, Zoom decided to cut me. Maybe he's tired of hearing these numbers. So if you allow me, I will try again. Is that okay?
Yes, try again. Couple of minutes, and then we have to.
No problem.
Go on.
I just want to share with you the following. All right. So, as I was mentioning before, Giulio, this is the overall picture of the most updated data that we have. We're talking about a minus 44% globally for international tourism arrivals. I would like to remind everybody that last year we were speaking about a growth of 4%. And we're still talking about the first 4 months. And this is not a forecast to the end of the year. This is the evaluation compared to the previous year. So another very harmful and but very explanatory Polaroid is the following. We have done forecasts until the end of the year, depending on the timing of reopening of international borders. Obviously, now we're in the better case because Schengen ideally has reopened after the 31st of July. I mean, the 1st of July, but obviously with the quarantines, with Russia and America and the Americas being closed up, obviously there could be some differences, but in this case, we forecasted it by end of year, the loss would be around 60%. Obviously, the further we go in the year, we had forecasted we were going to lose much more. In numbers, Giulio, these are the numbers that I would like to leave you guys upon, because also I need to apologize. I will not be able to stay that much longer in the discussion. We are talking about numbers that are really impactful in our economies. We're talking about a potential of 120 million direct tourism jobs lost. We're talking about a loss of export revenues of 1.2 trillion, potentially in the worst case scenario, and 1.1 billion fewer international tourists. Again, last year we were on a positive growth. Now we are at a drop down, and our case was just, how is this curve shape? Is it a U or is it an L? We're at the moment, Giulio, in a situation where, let's say it's a large U, and we're trying to recover. But the thing that worries me the most, and I will stop my sharing here, and I would like to drop this as a point of discussion, is that tourism is made up by 75% of small, medium, and micro enterprises. There are professions, like for example, tourist guides, that might completely disappear. We're talking about not only a restart, a start from zero, but also reconversion. As much as the textile industry reconverted into doing masks, what are these tourist guides going to do? For us, sustainability and innovation are not anymore nice words to be put next to a policy statement. They need to become the new normal, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to restart in a better way without, going back from 0 to 1,000 as if nothing happened with the pandemic. And the second element is that only when there is a holistic and positive approach between public and private, case of Portugal, case of many other countries also in the Mediterranean, there are objectives that can be achieved. Because when, I would like to quote you an example, there are some countries in the Mediterranean that are still struggling in order to identify the right measures. The public and the private sector is still fighting. There's a lot of division between regions, municipalities, central government, whatever. This does not help. So the advocacy that we've been doing during all this time is issuing global guidelines, priorities, recommendations, and standing close to governments to make them understand. This is why we started our journey to Italy. So, Giulio, thank you very much. I will stand by in case you would need me once again in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Priante. I hope you can share the numbers, and there will be a lot of new normalities, let's say, after this COVID crisis. And I'm introducing now the next speaker of the panel, Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, Managing Director, Directorate of Digitalization, Technology and Agribusiness within UNIDO, so another UN agency. Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well, loud and clear. So,
very good.
Questions for you would be, first one, recently your agency promoted a webinar whose title was, "What will a path to an inclusive and sustainable economic recovery for COVID-19 look like?" And what were the outcomes of this webinar? And the second question is, how is UNIDO helping entrepreneurs and governments to recover from this crisis? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And just to thank for the invitation to be with you. I'm representing the Director General of UNIDO, Mr. Lee Yong. Thank you so much. And I will rather start by your second question, because I believe that we started by responding, and we started with a phase of containment, and UNIDO started at the beginning to try to understand what's going on. We went all to lockdown, and well, together with the other UN agencies, but also the minister from Egypt mentioned the SDGs. We have the Sustainable Development Goals framework that guides us, and we are very worried what's happening. So we checked and looked at the SDGs, and certainly this crisis affected people, planet, and property, potentially and basically focused on people, on health, on nutrition, on gender. A lot of problems, but immediately when we realized that there are a lot of problems and it is a people-centered crisis, we also immediately saw that there is a big problem with the economy, which started in China because of the lockdown in China. The supply chain started to be disrupting, and the whole world started to be in a crisis that changed the supply chain. And therefore, we continued with the analysis, and to finalize this 3P approach is to say, on the planet side, well, from our side, we were looking what are the issues, and we have problems with medical waste and how to help to dispose them. And in China, there was the big demand, so UNIDO has been working on that. I think there was a bit of light, and in the planet dimension, we had light because we had blue skies. I come from La Paz, Bolivia. I know the blue skies.
Wow.
We had overall blue skies. I think this was the bright moment, and to leave the idea that when we are going to discuss into the future, we need to remember this moment of light that we had in relation to the environment, because this was like a wake-up call. When we will go to resilience, we will need to work in relation. We will need to build in this element, because we will go into the new normal, and this will be very important. But at the beginning, what we started to do is really to assist in industrial risk management, ensuring the food supply chain. And also we received a number of requests from governments to support them with guides for the SMEs. And here a special emphasis is that the most affected sector in relation to people, because it's an employment generating activity, and what we call economy and prosperity is the SME sector, and we have to put special attention. In Lebanon, we issued a guide called Recommendations and Preventive Measures, a response to COVID-19 guidance for industrial sector. Basically, it was a first guide in relation to disinfection, in relation to how you can work in the lockdown, still maintain certain activities, but the demand also started to come in the recovery phase, because you can imagine you cannot close down many companies and just start and open the door as nothing has happened. You have a number of risks coming, etc. But during this process also we all migrated. We migrated to cyberspace. We are in cyberspace, and it created a number of opportunities. And this is where our very SDG 9, in UNIDO's somehow favorite SDG, has not been so negative. It has not been so negative because innovation has received the biggest push. I listened very carefully and I took note of the 3 T's: temperature, technology, and trade complexity. And indeed, we were in the process. The climate change was a challenge. Technology acceleration was already on its way. The fourth industrial revolution was already on its way. We were already just flabbergasted how fast it is going, but it is amazing how much COVID has accelerated even more. I think COVID-19 has done the job in order to move to digital living, to a new life. But the biggest concern is that, and I think Ms. Durand addressed the issue, there is a big digital gap. For us, who could easily have access to the internet, etc., we continued. There was somehow a continuity in the way we could work, in the way we could continue our activities. But for many people, and as I say, UNIDO has a strong focus on the developing countries. The lack of access to internet means that many people have a big problem with the lockdown, have a big problem to earn their day by day. It has become a very important issue. In the phase of responding already, let's say when we were opening up, I think that we started very early and started to work virtually, and we had excellent discussions, and we moved forward because we wanted to show how quality infrastructure, standards, metrology, testing, all these technical activities are so relevant for COVID-19. But another challenge was to show that many standards, business continuity, resilience standards, risk management, and so forth, are very important for the enterprises, for the recovery, for resilience. We had also a lot of work to do in food safety control, and certainly then the moment came to reopen companies, and there the moment came, how can we do it in a safe and non-risky manner? I think that I forgot to mention cybersecurity is also very important that came through. And UNIDO for many years has been working in the local manufacturing, especially in Africa, and certainly this came and there is a big demand. Okay, we can work in the production of generic medicines, and eventually we will be able to also work in the future. Now, in the recovery phase, we have been working a bit more systematically, not responding so much to requests, but we were able to make some guidance documents for MSMEs, for business continuity, for recovery. In India, we created a big platform also to help the companies, the small companies, to be resilient. And we did, I mentioned the guides also in the region. And in the region, especially in Tunisia, we had a very interesting project, Mashrui. I don't know if this is correct, my project. And this is a project that led to many outcomes during the crisis, because this is an innovation program, and it has been helping textile companies to produce masks. It has been helping other companies to produce dispensers for disinfection. Small business was our preoccupation, and when we move, and maybe because of the lack of time, I will move to your question of this seminar. In a nutshell, I would say it is all about coming back to the new normal. The new normal will be digital, but this new normal cannot be based on a linear thinking. It cannot be only on efficiency. It has to be based especially on resilience. And I think this is something that maybe you are getting worried that we hear too much the word resilience, but this is what was discussed in this excellent discussion that we had with the University of Kiel, University of Cambridge, and they also discussed a lot. So recovery, it needs to give us the opportunity to do it differently. The new normal has to integrate the circular economy, has to integrate bioeconomics, has to give us the chance of doing things differently, and also that we will face the opportunity to have new production models that will be shorter, maybe local, maybe more regional, but allow also to a number of benefits for society, for environment, because they will generate employment locally or regionally, and also they will be more environmentally friendly. So it has been discussing also the issue of behavioral change beyond efficiency. And finally, in a nutshell also, they moved immediately into the fourth industrial revolution. And I think this is what I already mentioned, that COVID-19 has precipitated what a process that was already very fast going on. It precipitated, accelerated the platformization and the ecosystem governance. It continued diversification of the supply chain, and many things will change. How much it is related to COVID or to the new technologies, we will see, but they could be exploited. 3D printing and all this is very important. Digital infrastructure is a challenge. We as an agency are not dealing directly with this. Our partner UN agency, the ITU, is dealing with it, but it is very important for developing countries. And certainly that developing countries, when they start recovering, they will have to be more selective and identify strategic sectors where they can rebuild and they can attract investment, because it was mentioned already, 40% decrease of foreign direct investment. Investment has been really affected very, very heavily, and we will need to help the countries to attract investment in the new opportunities areas that will be related to this new normal, that will be digital, and that will be embedded in the fourth industrial revolution. I hope I have given you a flavor of our work. I had prepared some slides. I will share it with you. Then you will have the reference to the publications and to the work we have been doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And plus you come from the country of the Salar Uyuni, which I love. So you're a very lucky man. And it was really interesting, this point of view. And let's go on to the next speaker, Sufyan Al-Hissa, Regional Head of Operation for the MENA region of the IFC within the World Bank Group. Good afternoon, Sufyan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. I'll ask you a couple of questions. First one is from your perspective, how did this crisis impact on the MENA region, and whereabout it hit harder in terms of sectors and countries? Second question is, what actions is IFC implementing to help enterprises, among which startups, to find funding in a period in which, as people before were saying, liquidity is scarce? Thank you.
Thank you, Gilio, and good afternoon, everybody. It's my honor to be here today and to be part of this webinar and to focus on this important issue. So many thanks again for the organizers. Let me start by a little bit framing the issue, and I was listening very carefully to other speakers in which they highlighted many related issues to many regions, because I think this is a global crisis, and to start with, I think there is no country or even sector is immune from the impact of the crisis, apart from the technology part, which is the impact is quite positive rather than negative. So this is number one to start. But in the context of MENA, that we have this crisis coming from COVID-19, combined with a decline in oil prices that affected directly oil exporting countries, but indirectly also oil importing countries through remittances and through aid. And secondly, it's combined with already pre-existing challenges in the region. And to name only three for the, in the interest of time. One, that the growth even prior to the crisis was modest in the range of 1 to 2%, apart from Egypt, thanks to the reform and development programs being implemented over the last few years, which led to much higher growth rate. And the second one, that we have high unemployment rates, especially among youth. And according to the World Bank Group, including IFC, the projection that this region needs around 300 million jobs between 2020 and 2050. And I'm talking again prior to the crisis. And then the third one is the fiscal space available to many countries prior to that. And you can see the story of a debt to GDP in many countries, starting from Lebanon, Tunisia, and so on and so forth, is quite high. So there is no space for governments to spend more and more in traditional infrastructures or even service-oriented projects and issues. So you can think about how this led to higher impact in many of the countries. And I would say traditionally, because of COVID-19, I would say the most affected sectors are basically tourism, where you have many countries basically relying up to to 20% of their GDP on tourism. Logistic, and you name it, in country like Egypt, where the Suez Canal is affected, the trade is less within the region and globally. And then transport, especially airlines. And here we talk about GCC, where they have airline hubs that connect many regions. And then of course traditional sectors like constructions and retail were also impacted by the crisis. Now the good news that all countries, I think, not only in MENA region but globally, try to respond to the maximum to this current crisis. And I can see that in countries even like United Arab Emirates are even changing the operating model for the government to respond to the crisis, to be more agile, more efficient, and even to create a new department and entities that could address issues associated with the crisis, but also emerging issues, including artificial intelligence, the issue of digital economy, and the issue of maintaining the services virtually through the digital platforms for citizens and residents in the country. And of course, other countries are responding to key challenges. And here, I was listening again, to speakers where they talk about SMEs. In MENA region, SMEs, almost generate, large part of employment, but also they are the major contributor, to GDP and growth. But at the same time, they face, tremendous challenges, through lack of access to finance, but also, some of the policies that related to doing business and facilitating investment. And here to mention a few numbers, in MENA region, we have around 23 million SMEs. 1/3 of these SMEs, they have bank account. Only 8% of them, they have access to credit, which needed, in this environment, but also, in terms of expansions and working capital. It is estimated that basically, SMEs funding gaps is up to $200 billion in MENA region. And addressing this funding gap could lead to one extra or one addition percent to growth in the region. So maybe little bit again, to your questions about the type of policy response that could be, as part of that. Number one is again, access to finance for SMEs. Number two is addressing the fundamental issues related to doing business and creating a healthy and enabling environment, not only for SMEs, but for large businesses as well. And I must say that MENA region, many countries in the region, been performing very well and engaging in serious effort, in reform, in doing business and investment climate. And this is, really being reflected in the doing business report last year, including countries in GCC, but also Jordan, Egypt, and other countries. I think there is a long way to go to address that, basically to address not only constraints for SMEs and doing business, but also to reduce the cost for SMEs. And then the second part is, around the digital economy. And I was listening very carefully to the previous speaker with a lot of interest. I think in MENA region, there is a lot of use of internet and digital platforms. But if we think about the retail through digital platforms is quite limited compared with other region. And if we think about how many SMEs they have a presence online, also very limited compared with Europe, the neighboring countries for the region. And the last one that I want to mention is the issue of startups and entrepreneurship. And here, to address job creation or to support the growth, this will come from where? Will come either from expanding SMEs or looking more opportunities for the private sector or through disruption. And disruption here is the whole ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Again, there is a lot of good success stories in MENA region, in country like Egypt, and again also in country like GCC, and this is mainly due to access to finance, access to talent, and access also to market. But still, I think we have a long way to go. If we compare the number of companies registered in MENA region, new companies registered in MENA region, per 1,000 active population is 1.5 compared with 6.5 in the developing countries. So I think there is a long way to go to, with that. So now, to come to your question, what we do as IFC. And I think this is an important question because, both prior to the crisis and after the crisis or within the crisis, we've been responding to all these major challenges through our investment, but also our advisory services. Through our investment services, we've been very active to address issues related to working capital, trade, but also providing financing to the real sectors, in health and education sectors. And globally, we launched 8 billion a global facility to address and to provide financing according to the themes that I mentioned to existing clients. And there is a lot of plans also that we are doing for non-existing clients, new clients. In terms of advisory services, again, our advisory services, within the crisis and even before, is around the theme that I mentioned: investment climate, entrepreneurship, and the issue of digital economy. To give you some examples, last week in Egypt, for example, we provided to one of the banks $100 million to provide finance for SMEs. And this is quite important because this is also part of our COVID-19 crisis. We also invested equity investment, but also provided loan to a major hospital, chain of hospital, Saudi German hospital, to expand their operation to Egypt and Morocco. At the same time, we are doing a lot of advisory services almost in every country to support investment climate doing business, but also to support entrepreneurship, starting from Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, and so on and so forth. So in summary, I think this is again a major global crisis that we haven't witnessed since the Second World War. And by all means, one institution or one country alone can address the impact of this crisis. So basically IFC also is working with our countries, but also other development institutions to address these challenges and to support reform and development in MENA region.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Soufiane Al Issa. Financial inclusion is a theme that always comes back in our meetings. I would go further on our panel with Mr. Saeed El Hashimi, an old friend of PAM, counselor at the World Trade Organization. Saeed, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Do you hear me?
Absolutely loud and clear. I would ask you a couple of questions. First one is, okay, the WTO is one of the few organizations in the world that includes both China's. And yet in 2020, still many countries, for example, Lebanon, didn't join the WTO. Do you think that being part of the WTO would help those countries to overtake the current crisis? And the second question is, what actions can WTO carry out to help the economy overtake this crisis? Thank you, Saeed.
Thank you. Buon pomeriggio all'onorevole e mio caro amico Giulio Centemero.
Grazie.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله للمتكلمين باللغة العربية. So my greetings in Arabic to all Arab speakers. It's always a pleasure to be part of this family. And then to my native region, as I'm working for the World Trade Organization, but I'm actually originally from Morocco. So talking about the Mediterranean is something quite dear to my heart. And to answer your questions, Giulio, on the accessions to the WTO and why some countries are still outside, I think first, the figures and the research, the piece of research that we have on the benefits of accessions globally is there's clearly an increase in international trade, exports and imports from the countries that joined the WTO compared to the rest of the membership. There's also a bit of a difference on the quality of the accession work that countries do. And this is where the difference is made and how deep the commitments, how the negotiations are taken, let's say, with a lot of voluntary leadership from the countries themselves. The figures we have show that the countries with deeper commitments who acceded the WTO after '95 have realized 15% more larger and longer sustained growth than the ones that have done weaker kind of a commitment. But I think besides the figures, the accession process itself at the WTO has to be analyzed in the sense of the domestic reforms that can be triggered through the WTO accession. And here, it's quite interesting. I've asked a couple of colleagues who work on accessions, and they've told me that over the accessions we had 36 countries that joined the WTO since 1995. This has translated in about 8,000 pieces of legislation that have been passed through parliaments in those countries. So it's a dense reform process, and it has impacts, as we said, globally and overall quite positive. But above, I think the figures, it's the importance lies besides that, and it's very important today with the COVID-related situation, is the fact to belong as a member of the WTO to a rule book of rights and obligations, to a multilateral negotiations, which tries, it's not always perfect, but tries to play fair game in international trade and give chances to all, bigger or small countries. And I think this is something that is more needed today than even yesterday. Now we have you cited Lebanon, we have about 23 countries that are still trying to accede. Most of the things that these accessions face are depending on how much leadership actually comes. Many countries had 15 years negotiations, had over 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 questions posed to them by the membership, and that's something quite normal. The countries that are looking for accession should see this as a normal thing and try just to work along, convincing other members of the worthiness of them being part of the WTO. And I think this is something that and I jump to your second question to me, Giulio, and what the WTO is doing on the COVID-related issues. Of course, a lot of the speakers before me spoke about the unprecedented kind of nature of this crisis, the way it impacted everybody. And in a sense, the WTO has also included acceding countries in this framework of the response. Because once you start your accession process, you also have some rights and obligations, and more rights than obligations, actually. So you can be actually within the process of a couple of things that the WTO did related to COVID-19. I think number one, what we did is basically to try to have a clear picture of what trade policy measures members of the WTO have been taking to respond to the crisis. So we had a mechanism in place where we gather notifications from our members, whether they have raised their tariffs, whether they have put restrictions on exports of medical things, masks, etc. So we had something in place very, very early. And the important thing is we put all of this on a web page which is public. So it's not an intergovernmental thing. So everybody can go there and see. So that was first thing we did. The second thing was basically to provide a forum for proposals for members of the WTO to see how they can respond collectively to the pandemic. And they've doing this also with some information that our economists have been also given on how they see the impact in terms of numbers. And the numbers are quite, unprecedented too, but we are in unprecedented times. The economists of the WTO, the predictions is to say that the reduction of international trade is between 13% and 33%, depending basically, as some of the other speakers before me talked about, if we have an L-shaped, U-shaped, or W-shaped recovery, you can name a lot of characters, but it all depends basically if we have a second wave or a third wave of this pandemic and the impact on these things. The latest figures we had was about the first quarter of 2020. They showed a modest decline, about -2%. but that's only up to March. We will need to see the second quarter where the lockdowns started to become quite serious and the impacts were quite serious, and maybe we can be less impacted than the 33%, which is the worst case scenario that our economists have imagined. So the forum of proposals and discussion about our members have taken up discussions on how to ease restrictions on trade, led by many countries like Switzerland, Singapore, Korea, etc. There's a group of countries that have put in proposals on the table on how to ease collectively and keep trade flowing despite the difficulties. And one of the issues also that has been on the positive side of the news cycle is a report that the WTO produces for the G20 on on trade policy measures taken in the wake of the crisis, and they showed more measures, but taken actually on the facilitating side of imports, not on the restrictive side. So there's more facilitation, which is a good news that I wanted to actually share with you. The other initiative also is, and I think some of the speakers also spoke about that before me, is the situation of small and medium enterprises. And one of the issues there is basically many of those companies that want to export, you often, with crises like this, they don't have access to trade finance. So they don't have the way to finance their operation. So this is why our Director General, with many other development banks around the world, have issued a statement where they see how collectively they can ease access to trade finance, especially to small and medium enterprises, as a way also to ease the impact of the crisis. So these are a couple of things that the WTO has been doing alongside other partners in the UN family, but also with the World Bank, with the IMF, etc. But I think one key message, and I want maybe to finish with this couple of concluding remarks, is to say that sure, COVID-19 has an unprecedented impact on economies and international trade. And I think the other thing that we need is that collective response, global response should be the way to tackle the impact of this COVID-19. I think that's the only way. If countries go individually, I think it will be quite difficult to have a very quick recovery. And I think that's a key message. The WTO plays a key role. It can also play a bigger role. And I think our members, even before the pandemic, they had discussions on WTO reform. They wanted the WTO to advance its agenda differently, tackle other issues. And I think, as we say very often in every crisis, there is opportunities. This is, I think, the opportunity to tackle some of the issues. One is, and I would talk about two things, probably on a multilateral kind of setting. We have negotiations on how to reduce fisheries subsidies, which is a big theme. And to respond basically to food security concerns through this, and to respond to the SDGs, which is part of the SDGs. So we have the chance to advance that topic quite strongly on a multilateral basis. The second leg of that response is related to some initiatives that large groups of members of the WTO have issued on e-commerce, for example, on investment, and on small and medium enterprises. And we have also the chance to see how we can have deals on all those issues that can also help. And in addition, of course, everybody is aware about the dispute settlement body of the WTO, the situation. It's also maybe the opportunity to speak about this on a very direct way and find solutions to that. I think my final point would be all of these issues and alongside others like industrial subsidies could be solved through the WTO. And I think if the COVID-19 situation showed us something, it was some sort of global experiment on a few, at least on 2 issues that can be tackled by the WTO or can be helped by the WTO. One is we saw the impact on the environment. We had less pollution. It was like a large experiment where we stopped cars, we stopped people from moving, and we saw the impact. So maybe there's an opportunity there to see what we can do. And the second thing is the virtual electronic platforms and their role in our lives, including electronic commerce, have also benefited from the COVID-19 lockdowns as a large global experiment to see the reality that a lot of people were talking about, but not everybody has touched it. And I think the COVID-19 provided us with this experiment to understand and to see how our lives could be organized maybe for the better. And the WTO rule on the WTO role on this is actually to provide a platform to have a balance of multilateral rights and obligations to put some order in these issues and to make us able to recover quickly, and also to provide opportunities for growth, for international trade and beyond. And let me stop here and thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Thanks.
Thanks to you, Said. Thank you for the picture and also for the themes you raised. I would go directly to the following panelists as we're running a bit late, which is a good sign. The next panelist is Mr. Enrico Resmini, CEO of the National Innovation Fund of Italy. Mr. Resmini, do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I hope the same.
Very well. Thank you for being with us. I'd ask you 2 questions, like all the other panelists. So the first one is, what are the steps overtaken by the National Innovation Fund of Italy to address the COVID-19 crisis? And the second question would be, what can be done to sustain and improve the venture capital sector and in general entrepreneurship? For example, can regional, for example, Mediterranean focus policies be effective?
So thank you so much for inviting me here today. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for the 2 questions. I think you're touching upon a very important topic, which is how the VC system, can evolve or leverage, let's say, this COVID pandemic emergency to grow and become even more relevant in the overall innovation system in Europe, in the Mediterranean. The National Innovation Fund was basically set up last year from the government and Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. The idea is to basically, through an initial asset allocation of 1 billion euro, to grow immediately the size of the VC, of the venture capital system in Italy, in order to achieve the dimension that a country like Italy deserves, similar to France and Germany. The VC system in Italy is very small so far, and we need to make it grow and accelerate for the benefit of the startups of this system, but also to the benefit of our companies, enterprises, small, medium enterprises that can benefit through an accelerated innovation system. How we actually reacted to the COVID situation, but frankly speaking, I would say that we accelerated a lot the deployment of this 1 billion euro. Of course, we had to structure all the different funds that can leverage this billion into the market, and we did so. Currently, we have 800 million of assets under management, and we are actively financing a lot of startups and a lot of professional venture funds in Italy. So far, we have already authorized more than 100 million of investment. This has been a great ignition of money fuel, let's put it this way, capital into the market in a moment where the market needed most those capital. So luckily, we had this National Innovation Fund active in January. We're not stopping here, of course. We are currently attracting more investors to join us, to join our fund, to join the initiatives that we are promoting in Italy, so that the startup system can benefit from fresh money on the market to sustain, on one side, the most, let's say, the strongest, the most robust startups that we have in Italy, and that have all the numbers, all the KPIs to succeed even in this hard relaunch phase of the Italian economy. But on the other side, we want to make sure we grow and finance new startups. The way we're going to do this is through different type of funds that are active on the overall lifespan of the different startups. Now, when it goes to the regional type of collaboration and what can be done to sustain and improve the VC system, I think there is one single word that I would like to underline, which is transparency, cooperation. The more we can structure among these different markets in the Mediterranean area a true market of opportunities for our startups, the better it will be. Startups typically need 3 ingredients to succeed: a good idea, and here I mean ideas don't have regional barriers. A good idea can come out in Italy, but can come out in Egypt, can come out in Greece, wherever. Okay, so a good idea is a good idea, but then it needs 2 other key ingredients. The first one is capitals. We need to make sure that capitals are there to sustain the growth of this startup, but also companies, enterprises that can have startups as partners, that can make startups work within their premises, and that progressively can decide even to purchase some part of the equity of these startups. Now, I think we need to, within the Mediterranean, start creating this type of collaboration, and let me call it fluidity in the market of startups. How we can proceed? I think there are 3 things very concrete that we should be discussing, maybe in kind of bilateral agreements, country with country. The first one is structuring co-investment deals between funds, between national funds or private funds of the 2 nations. I think it's a very important element, because the strength of the venture capital system when it goes to funding comes if subjects from different countries start working together, because the mutual networking of these different funds can complement the strength for the startup. So first thing is really structuring this kind of co-investment deal. The second thing, we need to make sure we create structural chances for startups and companies cross-border to meet. We need to create business opportunities. It's a fundamental aspect for startups to grow. So a Tunisian startup can maybe start working for an agricultural company in Italy. An Italian startup on blockchain can maybe start working for the Egyptian banking. So I think this type of fluidity of market opportunities, business opportunity, it's something that we need to facilitate through dedicated meetings via web, if for the moment it's just via web, via physical touch points when we will be allowed to fly again and start creating this type of market matching events. The third thing I think each country should work on is facilitating a sort of a expansion kit or internalizational kit for startups that want to come and operate in a specific country. If I am in Italy, I should make life easy for an Egyptian startup to come over here to find, visa permits, to find easy housing, to find all the kind of legal support that they can need if they want to start operating in our country. And the same should apply for Italian startups that want to go and operate in Egypt. I think if we as governments facilitate this also entry point into different countries, I think we will obtain this fluidity, this market of opportunities, co-investment funds, expansion kits facilitated by governments, and matching events for startups and companies in the various countries. The more we do it, the more Mediterranean will become a clear market of opportunity. It will attract fresh capitals also from countries outside of the Mediterranean, therefore making the overall innovation ecosystem of the Mediterranean area much more rich and stronger than it is today. Thank you.
Thanks to you. It was really interesting and really very nice perspective. So I invite the parliamentarians of other countries maybe to activate our networks and try to cut some joint deals among funds of different countries. And I recall also that after summer, the economic panel vertical workshops meeting will start in order also to build guidelines to create business environments also for startups in each and every single member countries of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. Thank you so much for being with us. We go further on our panel with Mr. His Excellencies Ayman Segini, CEO of Islamic Corporation for Development of the Private Sector. Can you hear me, Mr. Segini?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. We had virtually met during the peak of the COVID crisis. It's nice to see you now, and I'd like to ask you two questions. So first one is what role the financial sector should play now during this crisis? And second question is, as ICD, what is the typical approach to create and improve entrepreneurship? Has it changed because of COVID or it hasn't?
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. First of all, it's a great honor to be on this call, and I'll try to give a little bit of perspectives of how we look at it. During this unprecedented crisis, governments and central banks have acted swiftly, deployed an arsenal of fiscal and monetary stimulus packages to save cash-strapped companies, provide liquidity to financial markets, and aid to people who have lost jobs. Just today, I was in a G20 meeting, and basically the amount was around $10 trillion globally. The financial sector support and significant to the business, the economy and society as a whole is taking a number of forms. The first one is banks are working as a de facto delivering systems, assisting governments in the distribution of the cash for those needed. With prudent and measures taken by the regulators and supervisions, some financial institutions in some countries have been given as financial institutions or been granted flexibility on the use of buffer reporting or treatment of past due loans, because they've been requested to delay some of the payments by almost 6 months in some cases. As a result, financial institutions have been able to support retail customers and SMEs through forbearance and measures and fee waivers, and examples of including actions such as offering mortgage payments relief to customers via deferring mortgages and payment deferrals, or existing small business loans, credit cards and credit lines, and so on. So overall, going forward, the financial institutions should make a commitment to work with citizens and businesses to provide flexible solutions to help them throughout the crisis. And here I always say that it's extremely important to build a relationship and real understanding of the clients and be very close to them and really understanding their business, so you can really provide them the service. And it's not like a cookie cutter kind of a thing, a relationship. So you are really realizing how to help them, how to give them the right services, and really packaging the relationship. And it doesn't look like you're only there during good times, but you have to be there during also bad times. how do we think that we can help entrepreneurs during this time period? ICD does provide entrepreneurs support through our channels by extending lines of finance to financial institutions, which we have in our network around 100 plus of those financial institutions. Majority of them we have ownership in even. So they basically function in the ideas and thoughts like we do think. We'd like them to provide the support to SMEs and also focus on SDGs that are under the United Nations SDGs. And it's very important for us to have this combination. So during this time period of the COVID-19, we did, as ICD, have set up a dedicated US $250 million stimulus package to aid SMEs and the private sector. But nevertheless, I think ICD will step forward and channel much needed liquidity through the local banks to enable them to support their business customers. And we found that most flexible and most practical because most of the clients are on the ground and the financial institutions are also on the ground. So they know best how to evaluate them, they know how best to service them, they know the economies that they're in, and they make sure that they can actually follow up on the business and monitor it correctly. But the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the fragility of many businesses and markets across the globe in a very short time. The context in which we are operating has changed dramatically. With the crisis hitting SMEs hard, affected both the demand and supply side, it is important to provide support for these survivals and during this crisis. So the world, I believe, will not be the same as you could all imagine. We could all think about, how COVID-19 got us to really work together much more faster through virtual communication. We don't need to really travel anymore as much as it thought to be important in the past. We could actually do decisions, sign on documents. We can actually work flexibly from any location we need to. But at the same time, it probably will also cost some jobs losses because of the higher efficiency. And on the other side, the challenges that most financial institutions or even private sector are facing. So I hope I answered both questions for you in a lump sum. I tried to be fast because I know everybody has probably already been on this call for a long time. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Segini. You were absolutely clear to show the portfolio of responses your organization is providing, which is great support to businesses in this period. Next panelist is Mr. Massimo Falcioni. Mr. Falcioni is the CEO of Etihad Credit Insurance. We were talking about trade finance. Well, here it is a specialist in the sector. Can you hear me, Mr. Falcioni?
Yes, I can very well. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear and I see you loud and clear. Good to see you again, especially after the peak of COVID crisis. The two questions for you are, first one, well, export is certainly one of the most jeopardized activities by COVID. And it equally concerns surplus and deficit countries. What could be a robust and effective response? Are you implementing it in the UAE, for example? Second question is, you have been working in a cross-cultural setting. Do you think different approach should be adopted by industry in different regions and countries?
Thank you very much for these questions and for the speaking invitation. A couple of speakers before me, specifically Mr. Sufyan Alissa and Mr. Saeed El Hashimi, they have a little bit introduced part of the answer to these questions. They mentioned about, firstly, the issues which exporters are facing at the moment. They mentioned about issues regarding access to trade finance, specifically for SMEs. So as you know, a large number of corporates are SMEs, and the UAE is exactly in this situation, because one of the key drivers for the diversification of the economy from the oil to a non-oil economy was really led by SMEs. So one of the key problems was to facilitate access to export financing to SMEs. So the robust, reply for a quick recovery should have gone to address this issue for SMEs. I will tell you later what we have done. Firstly, I would like to highlight to you which were the key issues I've heard, and maybe I will add something else specifically. The second one was access to market. Same. If you look again to SMEs, maybe we have passionate entrepreneurs, which they know very well about their product. However, when we talk about acknowledgement, about international markets, duties, local procedures, local laws, maybe that is where we find some weaknesses. And this sometimes might block SMEs to express their potential and export. Another element which has been mentioned by Mr. Said El-Hashim, as I said before, he mentioned about an initiative that we have done at the government level. So we have actually made it more agile, splitting the Minister of Economy in three, one for economy, one specifically Minister for SMEs, and one Minister for foreign trade. This is a very big, strong innovation for the country doing something like this. But the most innovative thing is that, which has not been well underlined in press, is not only the change, but also the fact that they have 1 year time to deliver. So they have been specifically addressed by our Vice President and Prime Minister, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, to say they have 1 year to deliver on the KPIs and accelerator of course, trade, of course, economy, in the light of a fast recovery of the UAE post-COVID. So this is exactly the innovation which has been done. So the government tried to find a more agile and more fresh, and actually even these are very, very young, I would say, talented ministers. So putting trust in young generation and creating a more agile and focused actually organization in the government, it's one of the response that we have done. And I think it's quite innovative, and it's something that I like to share with all of you. I said before, so the issues were sometimes the role of governments is key. So for trade, you mentioned before, has been highly impacted. I absolutely confirm. If you look at the numbers, the latest WTO, estimate, WTO expect a contraction globally of export in between 13% up to 32%. But is this a surprise? Well, it is a surprise of magnitude. But if you look what happened already in the first quarter of this year, there was already a reduction of 3% year on year. And you see, and if we add the second quarter estimate, we arrive to minus 18.5%. But if we see the trend of global container throughput, still from WTO, we see that there was a decline already at the end of 2019. In fact, the global growth of trade was expected to be not higher than 2.3% for 2019. So as some of the speakers before me mentioned, there were already some issues which were high impacting trade. And of course, COVID-19 has really increased the magnitude, which were the previous issues which needed to be addressed. Firstly, trade barriers. So when you ask me exactly what could be a robust and effective response, remove trade barriers. We all suffered, the whole market suffered, the whole global market suffered about this. Secondly, custom duties have to be reduced because the cost of export for exporters has highly increased. And for SME specifically, it was a barrier which was very difficult to overcome. Another important element is there are a lot of limitation of movement and trade of goods. And in many, many countries, there are a lot of restrictions, which sometimes even these have been done to protect local economies. And so despite there are some free trade agreements in place, not all of them have been fully implemented, and not in each sector. So by removing all of these kind of things, of course, the global trade will be immediately benefited by this, and will contribute to a fast recovery of a global economy. So now you ask me if we are implementing something. Well, as an export credit agency of the UAE country, what we have done, it was immediately to be a facilitator of trade and focusing firstly on the supply. As you know, during the COVID, one of the major issues would have been to disrupt the supply to the country. Now, for this country was specific a key topic, because we import 86% of what we consume in terms of food, and of course also the supply of medical products was very important. So the government put a first priority. Well, the very first, I would say, was to put citizens at safety. This was the first one. And compared to others, I would say that anticipating some, safety measures, not seeing any infection high count, so anticipating this kind of measures has impeded the country to go in a full lockdown. Actually, the UAE has never gone in a full lockdown. Now you might ask me, what does is related with the economy of trade? Well, it's a lot, because by anticipating this and by not going full lockdown, we have protected the economy, and we have protected also the exporters, which continued to trade even during the COVID. So second, as I said before, protect the supply chain. That was very important. On food, which was very important, medical devices. So it never happened that we had a mask like this costing 20 euro, like happened somewhere, but actually this still costed something like 25 cents in euro, of course, with the currency, which is dirham. So why? Because this was available. And don't be surprised that in the UAE, there was only one manufacturer of masks. So the first thing which has been done by the country immediately was to equip the country to the worst. And this has helped us a lot. After that, the country put in place two policies, monetary policies, through the central bank, which injected 100 billion dirham in order to ensure that corporates might have liquidity at the banking level. Then they went to a fiscal policy. As you know, the UAE doesn't have a personal income fiscal burden. However, there are a lot of things which is linked to services which government offers. Now, the federal government reduced 96 service fees from 50%, and in some cases they eliminated it completely. The local governments, because as you know, the UAE is a federal government done by 7 different governments, so even at government level, these fees have been highly reduced in order to alleviate the burden to SMEs and in general corporates. So that we can call fiscal policy. Last but not least, after that all this plan has been fully implemented, we went through the accelerators. Now, ECI, Ethiopia Credit Insurance, is an export credit agency. We are a stabilizer and an accelerator. So what we started to do, we have issued 851 credit guarantees, which was covering approximately $1 billion, which would not have happened without our support for 7 sectors: cable, steel, petrochemical, food, healthcare, automotive, exporting to which countries? To Egypt, Saudi Arabia, India, UK, South Africa, Kuwait. So what we did was to support and facilitate the export of our exporters during this period, providing trust, confidence, and competitiveness. So all of them could sell on credit and not on cash payment or letter of credit. We know that cash transactions would have been impacted by this situation. So what we did, we pushed and we tried to move to sell on credit, but guaranteed by us. And interestingly, by doing this, we have also eased their access to bank funding. Why? Because the banks liked our guarantee, so the receivables which were guaranteed by our guarantee, state guarantee, had a high goodwill. locally because we are a state sovereign guarantee, and internationally because we are a AA- rated company internationally. So this allowed exporters to sell on credit, to be competitive despite the global situation, to confirm the demand despite there was difficulty in liquidity from the buyers, and also not become themselves illiquid because the liquidity has been anticipated by the bank. So this is a best practice I would like to share with you that we have done. Coming back to your second question, if we should have in a cross-cultural setting different approaches by sector and by country. Yes, because each country is a totally different situation. We have a different kind of IT, and we saw before many speakers mentioned digitalization. This is very important. Digitalization is not only to see each other, and today is an experience of this. We are doing this fantastic seminar connecting so many countries, so many people, but also there are even, for instance, in trade and in many industries, digitalization is becoming key, and that's why, for instance, in UAE, we are investing a lot on that. One of the previous speakers mentioned the UAE investment in artificial intelligence. Don't be surprised that we have created Al Khalifa Artificial Intelligence University. So one university only focus on artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and all the usage we can do in the market. Because one clear message and clear understanding from the leadership of the country is without education, we don't go anywhere. And because the challenges are new, we need to have new instruments, new elements, and we need to educate the future leaders. So that's why setting up a university on artificial intelligence, I don't think that there are any other cases in other places. So again, we need to differentiate the approach. In this country, in this region, it was important, education and making things agile and quick. I think I answer your question. I don't want to take much more because the answer requires a lot of list of other things, but I think that I provided you enough. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic answers, very interesting information also about the Al Khalifa University. I personally didn't know about it. It's incredible. And you gave some good examples on how finance could help in from a different point of view, also talking about warranties and other instruments no one ever mentioned. I'd go on to the last panelist of the second panel, Professor Alberto Dell'Acqua. Is the chairman of Italgas and associate professor of practice of corporate finance and real estate at the SDA School of Management Bocconi in Milan. Professor Dell'Acqua, can you hear me? Hello?
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I hear you. I hear you. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, maybe there is some background noise where I am right now. I hope you can hear me quite clear.
Okay. So, two questions. First question, which could be the most effective financial policies and instruments to sustain the corporate sector in the post-COVID scenario? And the second question is, what can be done to sustain innovation and the startup ecosystem in these challenging times?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me at this important event for, well, actually the second year for me, attending the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. It's an honor and pleasure. Well, regarding the first question, which would be the most effective financial policies and instruments to sustain the corporate sector in the post-COVID scenario, I think that, well, in my opinion, there are two clear actions that should be undertaken to prompt a fast economic recovery in the post-COVID phase. A strong program of new infrastructure investments and fiscal policies that can reduce taxation for the corporate sector. These two policies should be combined together. Both these two measures can support entrepreneurship it is the key element to spur economic growth. In this respect, we have to create a condition that favor entrepreneurship and favor economic growth. All the Mediterranean area needs a renewal of its overall infrastructure systems, in particular for what concerns transports, roads, airports, bridges, railways, logistic hubs, ports. And let me also mention energy infrastructure in particular. This in order to make international connectivity and economic relationships stronger, more fluid for the future. Moreover, the Mediterranean area needs to catch up the more developed countries in terms of communications, since the modern economy demands reliable and faster networks of communications for its digital development and transformation. Strong infrastructure investments should be accompanied with fiscal policies that enhance entrepreneurship to create a new generation of entrepreneurs capable to develop and consolidate companies in the post-COVID era. Definitely, we need a new beginning for our economy, like it happened in the post-war, serve as a platform for the new entrepreneurial system, and the two forces together will reshape and recreate the new economy for our countries after the pandemic. For what concerns the second question, what can be done to sustain innovation and the startup ecosystem in these challenging times? Actually, I think that all the startup ecosystem at an international level has been impacted hard by the global pandemic, and something was already in place before the pandemic. Some initiatives were already done, but the Mediterranean area was still in an initial phase of developing its ecosystem of innovation. Many startups are still fragile, and they really risk to be hardly hit by the negative consequences of the global pandemic. Many innovative projects, jobs, and also the related human capital could be lost. So it is important to design new economic policy that put innovation at the center of the economic agenda, in particular in Italy as well as in other Mediterranean countries. It is fundamental to create economic incentives that push established corporations to make investments in innovation in new startups. Open innovation should be the key word to design policies for the economic recovery and to have a more harmonic development of the innovative ecosystems, while big companies can sustain the younger ones in their growth path. Also, let me share the view that by incentivizing new venture capital funds and the flow of funds to new ventures, this could be an action that can favor the development of the economic system and the consolidation of the economic system after the pandemic. I think that definitely more emphasis should be put in policies that create fiscal incentives to establish companies that make external investments in startups, and that facilitates the flow of private savings to innovative projects. That's my view regarding this very critical, but crucial issue that many economies are facing nowadays, and in particular, the Mediterranean area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dell'Acqua. The second panel is over with the last intervention. We have 6 people enrolled for the Q&A. I would ask these persons to be very brief because we only have 15 minutes to go. As you know, we hire translators, and the infrastructure is taken for 15 more minutes. So I would invite Mr. their friend, Honorable
يرجى تسجيل اسمنا والله إذا تكرمت.
عبد المجيد.
ممكن تسجل الاسم.
I would invite Mr. Abdel Majid Dennouni. It's a PAM Vice President, head of the delegation of the Algerian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly, and is a doctor in the economy. So can I ask Mr. Dennouni to intervene?
Julio, bonjour, vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend très bien. S'il vous plaît, vous avez quelques
Ami.
minutes.
Ça fait longtemps, j'espère que vous allez bien.
Oui, très bien. Très bien.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, chers collègues et amis députés de l'Assemblée parlementaire de la Méditerranée, bonjour à vous tous. C'est toujours avec beaucoup d'enthousiasme qu'on se retrouve au sein de la PAM pour échanger avec les experts et les collègues députés des pays de la Méditerranée sur la situation de leur pays et les solutions qu'ils proposent suite à l'arrêt du monde. Pour la réunion d'aujourd'hui, je pense qu'avec cette crise du Covid-19, le monde doit changer dans l'avenir. Le monde ne sera plus comme avant. Ça, c'est très important. Rien ne sera plus comme avant. Le monde va changer, bien sûr. Il y aura plus de développement, plus d'égalité, de coopération réelle entre les peuples. C'est nécessaire. Pour cela, une véritable économie sociale de marché doit s'installer. Je pense à la lumière des faits actuels pour éviter des mécontentements qu'on a vu ça et là aux États-Unis, en France et à travers beaucoup de pays suite à cette crise du Covid-19. C'est une économie de marché social à usage humain qui doit voir le jour à travers le monde entier pour éviter, comme je l'ai signalé, tous les mécontentements. L'histoire a démontré que les crises se terminent par des catastrophes et autres fléaux. Ensuite, des changements interviennent, surtout les plans. Pour les vols économiques, le changement passera par l'instauration d'une économie sociale des marchés, comme je l'ai souligné, c'est-à-dire un système de production et de redistribution à visage humain. Le système de production passe par la délocalisation des investissements, du nord vers le sud. Un développement équilibré entre les pays, une coopération équitable entre les pays. De cette manière, il y aura la fixation des populations des pays pauvres, Sahel et autres, sur leur territoire. Pas de mouvements massifs et d'exode de population, c'est-à-dire de phénomènes migratoires. Le développement économique, social et culturel réglera ces problèmes de migration. Cette situation freinera les guerres régionales et donne de l'espoir à tout le monde. Donc, un véritable plan Marshall doit être mis en place dans le Sahel, par exemple. L'économie mondiale doit changer, comme nous l'avons signalé. La crise de 29 a bouleversé le monde. Les injustices à travers le monde, le sous-développement, la misère des pays, les guerres, les flux migratoires et l'immigration clandestine sont révélateurs des injustices et de la hogra des pays pauvres. Cette crise sanitaire donnera à réfléchir aux grands de ce monde qui se croient, à mon avis, tout perdu. Nous signalons que la Banque centrale européenne a consacré 798 milliards d'euros en une semaine pour faire face à cette crise sanitaire. L'Allemagne à elle seule prévoit un budget de 850 milliards d'euros pour arrêter le corona. Les USA et autres pays développés ont mis en place des budgets qui dépassent les 3 milliards de dollars. Les pays pauvres d'Afrique et d'Asie ont des pays qui n'ont pas dépassé tous ensemble les 2 milliards de dollars. Ces pays n'ont pas d'eau ni d'hôpitaux pour faire face à cette crise sanitaire. Donc les injustices sont énormes. Et le monde, bien sûr, doit changer avec plus de justice, de développement, de coopération à visage humain. Ça, tout ceci sont les défis de ce monde qui naîtra après cette crise sanitaire du corona. Une véritable quatrième révolution industrielle nouvelle, basée sur des nouvelles technologies à dominante numérique, surtout, doit voir le jour. Je pense que un commentaire rapide sur les différents commentaires de nos amis experts qui sont passés. La responsable de la CNUSET a fait des recommandations intéressantes pour la relance économique. Je partage beaucoup de ces recommandations. Mais il ne faut pas oublier les pays du Sud pour lesquels il faut de vrais plans de développement. L'ONU, la CNUSET, l'OIT, l'OMC doivent intervenir auprès des instances financières internationales pour effacer l'ardoise des dettes extérieures des pays pauvres et faciliter surtout l'accès à la PME-PMI au financement pour démarrer le développement de ces pays et surtout leur PMI. Et effacer pas mal de dettes de pays, si vous voulez, de ces pays pauvres. Pour le cas particulier de l'Algérie et ce qu'elle a fait face à cette pandémie du corona, l'Algérie a pratiquement pris beaucoup de mesures économiques pour lancer et préserver son outil de production. Elle a mis en place un allègement des impôts, un report des échéances de paiement des différents impôts, de toutes les charges fiscales et parafiscales. Ces charges ont été, si vous voulez, retardées de plus de 3 mois. Les banques ont été instruites pour rééchelonner les crédits qui sont arrivés à terme, avec annulation des intérêts. Et puis, sur le volet social, le gouvernement a pris en charge plus d'1 million d'Algériens avec le paiement pendant plus de 3 mois de l'équivalent de 100 dollars par mois pour plus d'1 500 000 Algériens. Je pense que la crise va j'espère, ne plus durer, mais les pays doivent coopérer et trouver des solutions, si vous voulez, ensemble et prendre des mesures ensemble pour alléger le poids de cette pandémie sur toutes les économies et surtout le volet social de ces pays-là. Donc une véritable coopération doit exister entre ces pays. Et je pense que les parlementaires doivent coordonner leurs actions et puis essayer de s'informer mutuellement sur des solutions qui ont été mises en place dans différents pays de la Méditerranée. Et nous devons garder de l'espoir et des contacts permanents entre nos différents collègues de la PAM au niveau de la Méditerranée. Je vous remercie, je remercie les organisateurs de cette réunion. C'est la 3e du genre pendant cette pandémie. Ça nous a permis de voir un peu, de passer en revue les expériences des pays qui ont vécu de plein fouet, l'Italie, la France, l'Espagne, etc., qui ont vécu cette crise de manière très dangereuse. Et je crois que le moment est venu pour coordonner nos actions et travailler ensemble pour mettre un terme ou bien alléger les souffrances de nos populations. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Abdelmajid. Now it's time for Honorable Adele Tonnini from the Republic of San Marino. Adele, the floor is yours for a couple of minutes. I think, is she with us, Adele? Okay, I'll go on. So with Honorable Hatay Uzlu, head of the Turkish delegation to PAM. Hatay, are you there? Okay. Sorry, Adele is here with us. Adele, we cannot hear you. I think you are muted. I'll mute Adele. We don't hear you. So try to fix a technical problem. I ask again if Hatay Uzlu is with us. If Honorable Hatay Uzlu is not with us, then I would go on with Honorable Hammar Moussi, PAM Rapporteur on Migration, MP from Algeria. Hammar, are you with us? No, also Hammar is not with us. Then Honorable Ioannis Sarakiotis of the Inter-Parliamentary Assembly of Orthodoxy asked to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. The floor is yours for a couple of minutes.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for our online meeting, where politicians and experts from parliaments and institutions share their insights and proposals in addressing the challenges faced by governments and the productive sector in the Euro-Mediterranean and the Mediterranean region after the pandemic COVID period. We know that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean is the main channel of communication between the national parliaments of the Mediterranean countries, and its goal is to create a better political, social, and economic environment for the citizens of the member states. In the midst of the pandemic, we circulated a document pointing out inter alia. The current crisis has shown that each action of ours has impacts on the others, and that simply means that we need each other. History shows that every crisis is an opportunity to deepen our cooperation, to protect our citizens, to redefine the network of relationships in which we live and decide. To strengthen our parliamentary institutions as places of convergence of different views, and to safeguard our democratic achievements. Based on these observations, please allow me to convey some thoughts. Your decision to discuss the protection and the future of the small and medium size enterprises is successful and highlights the potentials the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean and any other interparliamentary institution have. We all knew that small and medium-sized enterprises in the Mediterranean region, but also in every developing country, are to a large extent the backbone of the economy, especially outside the large urban centers. We would like to emphasize the role of small and medium-sized enterprises. If in a country the number of small and medium-sized enterprises is small and not protected in one way or another, such a situation degrades the country's competition levels. In contrast, in countries where the presence of small businesses is high, the indicators of competition and productivity are correspondingly high. As societies differ depending on how competitive they are and whether they decide on the basis of impersonal, universally enforced rules, the role of a living industries in small and medium-sized enterprises is integral to generating the need for public goods, such as a reduction of corruption, universal law enforcement, improved infrastructure, public services, and good governance in general, provided by the authorities at local, regional, and national levels. This constant demand from small and medium-sized enterprises can contribute to the deepening of democracy. Through today's initiative, you are strengthening the possibility for interparliamentary institutions to contribute to the legislative work of individual parliaments, not only with general declarations and wish lists, but with very specific proposals. For example, in the case of small and medium-sized enterprises and the pretext to contribute to their rescue and recovery, it would be very useful, for example, to pre-decide to accept these products from customs duties in the Mediterranean for a necessary period of time. This is another step that requires other organizational capabilities, but we can also concentrate on such proposal. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks to you, Honorable Ioannis Sarakiotis. Now it's the floor is for Honorable Adele Tonnini from the Republic of San Marino. Please, Adele, you have a couple of minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the mistake. Good evening, sir. Bonsoir, salam alaikum. It's a pleasure to see you all again. San Marino has been seriously affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. With its small population of about 33,000, San Marino has become one of the countries with the highest per capita infection and mortality rates, the second highest in Europe. On the 8th of March was imposing the lockdown on the whole territory, but while this period, industries and manufacturers continue to work. Initially, the state hospital proved inadequate to respond effectively to the health emergency, with only 6 beds for the intensive care and no isolation areas. However, in the record time of a couple of weeks, the hospital was managed to reorganize, which now included 20 beds in intensive care, 70 COVID beds, with an entire area dedicated to fighting the pandemic. Now the situation is fully under control. San Marino has been declared COVID-free since the 25th of June. Today, our job is the economic recovery. Work start to resolve the critical issue that have emerged in the health sector. The goal is to improve the hospital structure, to support the effort made for the pandemic, to guarantee health and safety to our citizens and also to its 6,000 frontier workers. Most of all are Italian, who come daily in San Marino to work and who have benefited and still benefiting from all the protection to face job reduction deriving from the COVID emergency, completely covered by the San Marino health system, even though they live not in San Marino. The Parliament recently approved Sovereign Wealth Fund, a state-owned segregated investment fund to develop high-tech and innovation projects, to finance infrastructure projects like, as I said, a new hospital. Also an occasion for, I think, for other countries and private companies to invest in San Marino that offers, among other things, a competitive tax regime. Ordinary corporate income tax is equal to 70% of taxable income. The legislation on direct taxation is a model structure characterized by a competitive tax rate and has by simplified and computerized procedures, both for individuals and businesses. New businesses, activities, and new companies with share capitals are entitled to a tax exemption equal to 50% of the ordinary taxation for the first 5 years of operation, which reduce taxation to 8.5% of income. I think my country have all the right cards to play an important match for the development also of the Mediterranean area, not only for the economic aspect, but also for the new relations between states with the spirit of collaboration, solidarity, but above all of neutrality that has always characterized my country, a small republic proud for its 700 years of freedom and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adele. It's now time for Hammar Moussi, PAM Rapporteur on Migration and member of the Parliament of Algeria. Hammar. Hammar is not there, so there was also Dr. Musa Al-Wahash from Jordan. Dr. Al-Wahash, you have 2 minutes and the floor is yours.
شكرا. يعني بداية أنا أوجه الشكر لإدارة هذا الاجتماع وكذلك أيضا لكل المتحدثين. لا شك أن الأزمة هذه أزمة عالمية و ألو مسموعة. لا شك بأن الأزمة نعم. أنا وجهت الشكر لإدارة اللقاء وكذلك للمتحدثين جميعا. ولا شك أن هذه الأزمة يعني هي أزمة عالمية يعني يتفق فيها الجميع، ولذلك نجد أنفسنا متفقون. أنا عندي صوت مفتوح من عندي من هون. نعم. ألو. نعم. نجد أنفسنا متفقون نجد أنفسنا متفقون جميعا على أن هذه الأزمة هي أزمة ألمت بالجميع. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يرفع هذا البلاء والوباء عن العالم أجمع. لا شك أن الجميع تضرر فيما يتعلق بالاقتصاد. يعني ما قبل الكورونا أيضا في الدول النامية الاقتصادات فيها ضعف، أصلا كان في تراجع في الناتج المحلي، تراجع في النمو الاقتصادي، فجاءت هذه الأزمة فزادت الطين بلة. ولذلك نحن نقول، أنا أتحدث من الأردن، يعني نحن نعم نجحنا في مواجهة هذه الجانحة بشكل عام. لا شك أنه الحمد لله رب العالمين، هذا طبعا كانت إجراءات مبكرة في مواجهة هذه الجانحة، لكننا نعلم أن هذا الإغلاق الذي تم وأدى إلى المحافظة على صحة المواطنين، لكن هناك أمر أيضا في غاية الخطورة وهو ما بعد الكورونا، يعني اللي هو الاقتصاد. نعلم أن الاقتصاد تضرر كثيرا، تراجع الناتج المحلي نتيجة إغلاق القطاعات المختلفة وخاصة القطاع الخاص. أيضا نعلم بأن السيولة قلت إلى حد كبير، وهنا نقول أنا أتفق مع الذين تحدثوا أن العولمة أصبحت الآن لم نستفد منها شيئا في خلال الأزمة. يعني الآن أصبح الكل يريد أن يعتمد على الذات. هذا لا يعني أنا لا أقول أنه يعني أن تستطيع هذه الدول أن تعتمد على نفسها دون التعاون مع الجميع. نحن نقول بحاجة، نحن وكل الدول التي على شاكلتنا، حتى نعلم أن الدول جميعها تضررت، نعم، حتى أصحاب الاقتصادات القوية، لكننا نحن بحاجة لا شك إلى منح تيسر أموال لتستطيع الشركات الصغيرة والصغرى والمتوسطة أن تعمل وتعود عجلة الاقتصاد. هناك أيضا اهتمام بالرعاية الأسرية، بالرعاية الاجتماعية، تسليم الأموال مباشرة للناس. البطالة زادت، نعم، الفقر زاد، نعم، فلا بد من توفير أموال سيولة. نعم، تدخلت البنوك المركزية وعندنا تدخل البنك المركزي، لكن هذا لا يكفي. نريد أيضا المنح أن تأتي منح ميسرة. كذلك كان يعني نتمنى على الدول الاتحاد الأوروبي والتي لنا طبعا علاقات طيبة في الأردن مع الجميع، ونحن نتوقع الآن أن يساعدنا الاتحاد الأوروبي، وهو ساعد ونشكره على مساعدته، وأيضا لابد من المساعدة أكثر. الجميع يعلم إمكانيات الأردن، نعم، الضائقة الحمد لله تجاوزناها. نخشى الآن من العودة لهذا الوباء. في هذا اليوم كان عندنا مؤتمر صحفي حول الوضع الصحي والاقتصادي. الحمد لله لا يوجد أي إصابات عندنا في هذا اليوم. الإصابات معظمها خارجية وليست داخلية. السياحة الآن اللي تضررت ضررا كبيرا جدا. يعني الحمد لله رب العالمين الآن هناك إجراءات بدأت في تحرك السياحة العلاجية. الوضع الصحي عندنا الحمد لله يعني كان في غاية القوة والمتانة، وهذا يعني ساعدنا كثيرا. الوضع الزراعي أيضا اللي هو المواد الغذائية أيضا هذه ساعدتنا كثيرا. هذه الجائحة أعتقد أنها نبهتنا إلى أمور علينا أن نتنبه لها جيدا فيما يتعلق بالوضع الصحي، فيما يتعلق بالغذاء. هذا شيء مهم جدا. كذلك أيضا فيما يتعلق بالصناعات، الوضع كذلك قطاع الصناعة يجب أن يتم الاهتمام به ليحافظ على العمالة. هناك بالتأكيد يعني إغلاقات سببت تراجع في الإنتاج. أيضا نقطة مهمة جدا وهي الضرائب. نعلم أن الضرائب أيضا هذه أيضا تأخذ من السيولة المتوفرة عند الناس. نحن أنا أتفق مع الذين تحدثوا عن ضرورة تخفيض الضرائب، والحكومات الآن يجب أن لا تعتمد على الطرق القديمة وهي الجباية والأموال من الناس. هنا الآن الناس بحاجة، فحتى نحافظ على أنفسنا وعلى غيرنا من وجود اضطرابات لا قدر الله يعني بسبب قلة المال وبسبب قلة الإمكانيات. أعتقد لابد من أن يكون هناك تدخل مباشر، مع علمنا بأننا نعمل بكل ما نستطيع رغم الإمكانات المحدودة عندنا، إلا أننا يعني قيادة وحكومة وشعبا هناك وعي، هناك تكافل، هناك يعني تسابق من المواطنين في مساعدة بعضهم البعض. نأمل أيضا أن يحدث هذا على مستوى الدول، ونحن في هذا التجمع الكبير اللي نأمل أن يكون في تعاون و يعني مساندة، وأن الذين لهم ديون على الدول النامية نأمل منهم أن يعني الآن يوقفوا المطالبات أو ويقللوا من الفوائد الكبيرة والأعباء التي تشكل ثقل على هذه الدول التي تعلمون جيدا كيف تسير الحياة وكيف كان اقتصاد هذه الدول ونحن منها قبل هذه الجائحة. أنا أعتذر عن الإطالة وشكرا، وأتمنى أتمنى للجميع السلامة والتعافي بسرعة من هذه الجائحة، وشكرا.
Thank you, Dr. Moussa. Unfortunately, we have to go through the conclusions, so I would ask Pedro Roque. Pedro Roque is President of the PAM Committee on Economic, Social and Environmental Cooperation and President Emeritus of PAM to do the closure of this meeting. I thank you all for participating. It was really interesting.
Thank you, Giulio. You know that the Euro-Mediterranean area, as well as the MENA region and the entire world, is facing a unique crisis in our lifetimes. Starting as a public health problem, soon it developed in a huge economic and financial crisis. We must go back to the 1920s and 30s to have a similar situation, both at public health level as well as the economic level. PAM, as an interparliamentary organization that gathers parliaments and parliamentarians around the Mediterranean basin, believes that it is of its own responsibility to discuss these major problems posed by the pandemic at the economic level, and especially how to address them in order to recover with less pain as possible. But also to understand what are the legislative actions that we as MPs should put in place at national and regional level in order to support the recovery of the economic activity, the productive sector, including tourism, and the regain of the levels of trust among our citizens, families, and enterprises. For example, the impact of the tourist sector seems especially strong on the Mediterranean basin. Many of the Mediterranean countries' GDPs rely strongly on the tourist sector, and this crisis deeply affects revenues and jobs. One must understand that at the public health level, until we achieve either the herd immunity or an effective therapy or a vaccine, or all of them combined, this coronavirus will be with us for many months, if not years, and we need to accept that fact and to learn to live with it. Accordingly, the economy must adapt to this new situation in order to achieve the recovery and to minimize the social effects. But many issues have been discussed here today, among others, the challenges to globalization, the worsening of the trade wars, the ongoing revision of supply and production chains, the importance of the role of the small and medium enterprises, the absolutely need to keep interest rates low to sustain recovery, the collapse of remittances with a huge social cost, the green agenda affected by the low cost of fossil fuels, poor and weak digitalization, cybersecurity as an element aggravating the crisis and inequalities in many countries, confidence and trust needed in a capital markets to sustain productive sector and integrated recovery, the need to strengthen supply chain at the regional level, reducing closing of trade borders to enhance international trade, and e-commerce as an important experience that needs to be well evaluated in the recovery phase. So to conclude, let me thank you all on behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly of Mediterranean for your participation as panelists or as participants and your contribution for this interesting discussion. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Shukran jazilan. Muito obrigado.
On behalf of PAM, I would like to thank you for your support and participation. We will soon distribute a report on the meeting and build on the recommendation you have provided and disseminate those to all our members and to all the delegates who attended. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice evening.